Thank you for joining in today's cryptid horror stories. The first story today is called The Adhesive Shore, and this is a horror story about the Kelpie. And in this story, a remote, rain-sodden village in the Scottish Highlands, bordering a black water loch known as Loch and t-Sluagh. The village is dying, the youth have left, and the remaining elders speak in hushed tones about the bridle and the adhesive. There is a palpable sense of dread, not of a monster but of a specific condition of the water. The second story today is called The Liver's Wake, and this is a horror story about the Each-uisge. And in this story, in a remote, rain-slicked village in the Highlands where the locals avoid the black Water Loch after dusk. A group of city-dwelling university students on a hiking trip, led by Callum, who is overconfident and dismissive of local folklore. While trekking along the shoreline, they encounter a magnificent charcoal-gray stallion standing perfectly still by the reeds. It looks groomed, out of place, and impossibly beautiful. In the description below, the stories have been timestamped. Also, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss the stories yet to come. Now for today's cryptid horror stories, I hope you all enjoy. The Adhesive Shore. Chapter 1. The man's hand was pale and trembling. He held the pumice stone in his right fist, gripping it so tightly that his knuckles had gone the color of old bone, and he scrubbed. He scrubbed his left thigh with a desperate mechanical fury, pressing the rough surface of the stone against his skin with a force that should have drawn blood but did not, because between the stone and the skin there was a layer of something that was not skin and was not water and was not anything that the man had a name for. It was a film. A thin, translucent film of slime, no thicker than a sheet of paper, covering a patch of his thigh about the size of a playing card, and it was clear. You could see through it, could see the pores of his skin beneath it, could see the small hairs on his leg flattened by its weight, and it was wet. Constantly, interminably wet, as if it were being fed by a source that never stopped, as if the slime itself were a surface phenomenon, the visible tip of something that went deeper, that had its roots in his flesh, that was connected to something that lay beneath the skin. He scrubbed and the slime did not budge. It stretched. It was elastic, flexible, yielding to the pressure of the stone, and then snapping back into place when the stone passed over, like a membrane, like a film of oil on water. And the more he scrubbed, the more it spread. It had been the size of a coin when he first noticed it, 3 days ago, in the aftermath of the horror at the loch. Now it was the size of a playing card, and its edges were not crisp but feathered, blending into the surrounding skin so gradually that he could not tell where the slime ended and his flesh began, and the flesh beneath the slime was different. It was softer, more sensitive, as if the slime were changing the texture of his skin, were making it more like itself, more adhesive, more yielding, more wet. He scrubbed and the slime pulled. That was the thing that had driven him to the pumice stone, that had driven him to this rented room in the village of Kinlochmore, that had driven him to sit on the edge of the bed in the gray, rain-streaked light of a Highland morning and scrub his own flesh like a man trying to remove a curse. The slime pulled, not metaphorically, not a psychological sensation, not a trick of anxiety or trauma, physically. He could feel it, a tangible, measurable force, a tug in the muscles of his thigh, a magnetic pull toward the northwest, toward the loch, toward the black water that lay in the valley between the mountains like a wound in the earth. When he stood, the pull was stronger. When he walked away from the loch south, east, toward civilization, toward roads and hospitals and people who might help, the pull became a drag, a resistance, a sensation of walking through water, of pushing against a current that wanted him to go back, and the slime on his thigh would pulse, faintly, rhythmically, in time with a heartbeat that was not his own. He scrubbed. The pumice stone rasped against the film, and the film held, and the man's breathing quickened, and his eyes, gray, bloodshot, hollow with the particular exhaustion of a man who has not slept in 3 days, were fixed on the patch of translucent slime with the intensity of a person staring at a wound that will not close, and his mouth was set in a hard, thin line, and he was not crying. because he had cried already in the hours after the loch, in the moments between the screaming and the running and the crawling up the rocky shore, and now the tears were done, and what remained was this: a man in a room, scrubbing his leg, trying to remove something that did not want to be removed, that had been put there by something that was still waiting for him to come back. His name was Alan Cooper, and 3 days ago he had watched 3 people die. Chapter 2. The village of Kinlochmore was not a place that appeared on most maps. It sat in a fold of the Scottish Highlands, in a glen that ran between 2 ridges of grey, treeless mountains, and it was built on the shore of a loch that the locals called Loch and t-Sluagh, the Loch of the Host, or the Loch of the Multitude, a name that referred, according to the few historical records that mentioned it, to the ancient belief that the loch was a gathering place for the spirits of the dead. The village had perhaps 40 inhabitants, mostly elderly, mostly the descendants of families who had lived in the glen for generations, who had fished the loch and farmed the thin, rocky soil and raised their children in stone cottages with slate roofs and peat fires, and who had watched, over the decades, as the young people left, one by one, then in pairs, then in families, drawn south to Glasgow and Edinburgh and Aberdeen by the promise of work and education, and a life that did not depend on the weather and the fish and the dark water at the edge of town. Those who remained spoke in a dialect of Gaelic that was nearly extinct, and they spoke of the loch the way one speaks of a relative who is dangerous but unavoidable, with caution, with respect, with a careful avoidance of certain subjects. They did not swim in the loch. They did not fish in the loch, not any more. Not since the last fisherman who had tried, 30 years ago, had come back without his boat and without his wits and had sat in his cottage for the remaining years of his life, staring at the wall, humming, his hands moving in slow, repetitive motions as if he were trying to wipe something from his palms. They did not walk the shore of the loch after dusk. They did not speak its name in the dark, and when visitors came, hikers, campers, the occasional urban explorer with a camera and a blog and a reckless appetite for the remote, they warned them, in the gentle, oblique manner of people who have been giving the same warning for centuries and have learned that it is rarely heeded. "Stay off the water after dark," they would say. "The bridle doesn't like to be disturbed." The visitors would smile and nod and think it was a local custom, a quaint superstition, a bit of Highland color. They would thank the locals for the warning and go about their business, and the locals would watch them go, and they would close their doors and draw their curtains and wait for the sound that they knew would come. The distant, rhythmic dripping like a leaking faucet, that meant the horse was in the shallows. Because the loch had a horse. It was not always there. It appeared and disappeared with a frequency that had nothing to do with the seasons or the weather or the migratory patterns of any known equine species. It appeared when it wanted to appear, and it appeared to those it wanted to appear to, and it was always the same. A stallion, jet black, standing in the shallows of the loch at the point where the water met the shore, its coat so dark and so smooth that it reflected the sky like polished stone. Its mane long and wet and constantly dripping, the sound of the dripping carrying across the water with a clarity that was unnatural, that was too loud, that was too regular, like a metronome, like a heartbeat, like a countdown. The locals called it the bridle. They called the water the adhesive. They did not call it a Kelpie or a water horse or any of the names that the folklorists and the academics had given to the creatures of Scottish legend, because those names were too clean, too tidy, too contained. What lived in Loch and t-Sluagh was not a legend. It was not a story. It was a condition of the water, a property of the place, as real and as permanent as the stones and the heather and the rain. The rain. It always rained in Kinlochmore. Not the hard, dramatic rain of storms and thunder, but a soft, persistent, maddening rain that fell from a sky the color of wet slate, and that turned the ground to mud and the mud to soup and the air to a thing that was not quite air and not quite water but something in between, something that coated the skin and filled the lungs and made everything. The cottages, the mountains, the loch itself. look as if it were being viewed through a film of tears. The rain was the atmosphere of the place, its medium, its natural state, and the people who lived in it were people who had adapted to wetness the way fish have adapted to water, not by resisting it but by becoming it, by letting it soak into their clothes and their skin and their bones, until they were no longer dry people in a wet place but wet people in a wet place, and the distinction between themselves and their environment had dissolved. Alan Cooper was not a wet person. He was a dry person, a city person, a London person, a man who lived in a flat with central heating and double-glazed windows and who spent his weekends in pubs and parks and cinemas, and whose idea of the outdoors was a park bench on a sunny day. He was 32, an architect by trade, and he had come to the Highlands because his friend Marcus had organized a hiking trip, and Marcus was the kind of person who organized things, trips, parties, weekends, and who had a force of personality that made refusal feel not just difficult but somehow rude, as if declining his invitations were a rejection not of the activity but of Marcus himself. And Alan, who was not good at saying no to people, had found himself on a train to Inverness with a backpack full of new hiking gear he had bought the day before, and a vague, optimistic sense that the Highlands would be good for him, that the fresh air and the exercise and the distance from London would clear his head and give him perspective and make him feel, for the first time in years, like a person who was not merely surviving but living. Marcus had brought others. There was Sienna, Marcus's girlfriend, a photographer with cheekbones that could cut glass and a smile that could melt a glacier, and a way of moving through the world that suggested she found everything either fascinating or boring, and there was nothing in between. There was Dean, a large, cheerful man with a shaved head and a red beard, a paramedic by training, who carried a first aid kit the size of a suitcase, and who treated every minor scrape and blister with the grave, methodical attention of a man who has seen real trauma and knows the difference between a paper cut and a catastrophe. And there was Fiona, quiet, watchful, a marine biologist who had spent the last year studying deep-sea organisms in the North Atlantic, and who had the pale, slightly otherworldly look of a person who has spent too long in dark, pressurized environments and has not yet fully readjusted to the surface. They had arrived in Kinlochmore on a Thursday afternoon, after a journey that involved a train, a bus, a hitchhike in a farmer's truck, and a final 2-mile walk along a road that was less a road than a suggestion of a road, its tarmac long since surrendered to the heather and the mud. The village received them with the polite, slightly bewildered hospitality of a community that was accustomed to being the destination of lost travelers, but not the destination of intentional ones. They were given rooms in the only establishment that could be called accommodation, a stone cottage with a hand-painted sign that read the Bothy, and that functioned as pub, guest house, and apparently the village's primary social venue, since the common room was occupied at any given hour by 3 or 4 elderly men who sat by the peat fire and drank whiskey and spoke in Gaelic, and looked at the visitors with expressions that were not hostile but were not warm, that were instead the expressions of people watching something they had seen before and knew the outcome of. The landlord was a man named Ewan Mac Rae, 70 years old, broad-shouldered despite his age, with a face that was weathered the way a cliff face is weathered, by wind, by rain, by the slow, patient erosion of time. He poured their whiskey without comment, showed them to their rooms without small talk, and as they were heading out for an evening walk along the loch shore, the sky gray, the rain falling softly, the light fading, he said from behind the bar, without looking up from the glass he was polishing, "Aye, well, stay off the water after dark. The bridle doesna like to be disturbed." Marcus laughed. "The bridle, what's that then?" Ewan looked at him. His eyes were the color of the loch, dark, still, fathomless, and there was something in them that was not amusement and was not warning but was something older and more tired, the look of a man who has given the same speech 100 times and knows it will not be heard. "The horse," he said, In the shallows, if you see it, leave it be, walk the other way, and whatever you do, donna touch it." Marcus laughed again, easily, confidently, the laugh of a man who has never encountered a situation that charm and optimism could not handle. And they left, and Ewan watched them go, and he set down the glass he was polishing, and he poured himself a whiskey, and he drank it, and he did not pour another. Chapter 3. They saw the horse in the morning. It was standing in the shallows of the loch, 50 meters from the shore, the water reaching its knees, its body silhouetted against the gray light of a Highland dawn. It was jet black, not the brown black of a dark horse, not the sun-faded black of a horse that has been in the weather, but a true, absolute, depthless black, the black of obsidian, of midnight, of a closed eye. Its coat was smooth, impossibly smooth, as if every hair lay in the same direction, as if the coat had been applied rather than grown, as if the animal had been carved from a single piece of material, and polished to a sheen that reflected the gray sky and the gray water and the gray mountains with a clarity that was more like a mirror than like a living thing. And its mane was long, reaching past its neck, falling in wet, heavy strands that dripped. The dripping was constant, a steady, rhythmic drip, 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 each drop falling from the tips of the mane hairs and striking the surface of the water with a sound that was, in the silence of the dawn, shockingly loud. Not loud in volume. The drops were small, the sound was quiet, but loud in clarity and precision, in the way each drop sounded exactly like the one before it, identical in pitch, in duration, in resonance, as if the dripping were not a natural phenomenon but a signal, a pulse, a heartbeat that was being transmitted through the medium of the water. The horse was still. It did not move. It did not graze, did not drink, did not shift its weight or swish its tail or do any of the things that horses do. It simply stood, its head slightly raised, its ears forward, its eyes, dark, liquid, vast, fixed on the shore, on the place where the land met the water, on the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the loch. It was the image of a horse the way a statue is the image of a person, perfect, still, and somehow wrong, not in its details but in its stillness, in the absolute, unnatural absence of motion that made it look less like a living animal and more like a thing that was waiting. Marcus saw it first. He was up early. He was always up early, a habit of his upbringing, and he had stepped outside the bothy to smoke a cigarette he had promised Sienna he had given up, and he had seen the horse and come back inside and gathered the others with the excitement of a child who has found a treasure. "There's a horse," he said. "In the loch, a black stallion, it's magnificent." They went to look. They stood on the shore, the rocky, muddy, rain-soaked shore of Loch and t-Sluagh, and they looked at the horse, and for a long moment no one spoke because the horse was, in its way, beautiful. Not the beauty of a living thing, not the warm, imperfect, messy beauty of an animal with breath and heartbeat and the small, constant movements of life, but a cold, precise, geometric beauty, the beauty of a thing that has been designed, that has been crafted for a purpose, and the purpose was not to be admired but to be approached. "God, it's gorgeous," Sienna said. She raised her camera. The shutter clicked and the sound seemed too loud in the silence and the horse did not react. It did not flinch, did not turn, did not acknowledge the sound or the people who made it. It stood and it dripped and it waited. "What's it doing out here?" Dean asked. "There are no farms nearby, no stables. Is it wild?" "Could be," Fiona said, but her voice was uncertain. She was looking at the horse with an expression that Alan, standing beside her, could not read. It was the expression of a scientist confronting a specimen that does not fit the taxonomy, the expression of a person whose categories have been violated. "There are wild horses in the Highlands, but this doesn't look wild. It looks kept, groomed. Look at its coat. There's not a mark on it, not a burr, not a tangle, not a scratch." "Maybe someone owns it and it got loose," Marcus said. "Poor thing looks like it's stuck in the shallows. The water's not deep there, but maybe it's tired, lost." He stepped forward. He was already walking toward the water's edge, his boots sinking slightly in the mud, his body leaning forward with the confident, purposeful motion of a man who has decided on a course of action, and is not going to be deterred by mud or rain or the faint, persistent feeling that something is not right. "Marcus, wait," Fiona said. "The landlord said not to touch it." "The landlord said not to touch it after dark," Marcus said. "It's morning, and look at it, it's just a horse. A lost horse. I'll lead it to shore and we can find out who it belongs to." "I don't think you should," Alan started, but Marcus was already in the water. The shallows were shallow. The water reached his ankles, then his calves, then his knees, and the bottom was firm, not muddy, and he waded toward the horse with the easy, confident stride of a man who has ridden since childhood, who has handled horses all his life, who knows the body language of equines the way a musician knows the body language of an instrument. "Easy, boy," Marcus said. "Easy, I'm not going to hurt you. Let's get you out of the water, eh?" The horse did not move. It did not react to his voice, to his approach, to the sound of his boots in the water. It stood and it dripped, and its dark, liquid eyes watched him come, and Alan, standing on the shore, felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not fear, not yet, but the precursor of fear, the atmospheric pressure that precedes a storm, the silence before a scream. Marcus reached the horse. He was close enough to touch it, close enough to see the individual hairs of its mane, the surface of its coat, the dark, wet surface of its skin, and he extended his hand slowly, palm up, the way you offer your hand to a strange horse, the way you show an animal that you are not a threat. "Easy," he said, "easy now." His palm touched the horse's flank. And the world changed. Chapter 4. Alan would later try to describe the moment of contact, and he would fail, because the moment of contact was not a single moment but a process, a sequence of events that unfolded in a span of time so short that it could not be measured by the conscious mind, but so dense with sensation that it felt like an eternity. Here is what he saw, from the shore, 30 meters away. Marcus's palm pressed against the horse's flank. The contact was brief, less than a second, and then Marcus's hand did not come away. It should have. It was a casual touch, a light pressure, the kind of contact that is broken the instant the person decides to break it. But Marcus's hand stayed. His fingers, which had been open, relaxed, curled slightly, inward, as if gripping, and his arm, which had been extended, stiffened, and his body, which had been leaning forward, pulled back, and Alan could see, even from 30 meters, the effort in his posture, the strain in his shoulders, the way his boots dug into the riverbed because Marcus was trying to pull his hand away, and his hand was not coming away. "What's happening?" Sienna asked. She had lowered her camera. She was staring at Marcus, at the horse, at the space where man and animal were connected, and her voice was not panicked, not yet, but it was confused, the voice of a person whose visual field is telling her something that her brain cannot process. "Why can't he let go?" "He's stuck," Fiona said. Her voice was flat, clinical, the voice of a scientist observing a phenomenon. "He's stuck to the horse." Stuck, Dean was already moving, striding toward the water, his paramedic's instincts overriding everything else. "Stuck how?" "Like glued." Alan was moving, too, jogging along the shore, then wading into the shallows, the cold water soaking his boots and his trousers, his eyes fixed on Marcus, who was pulling now, really pulling, his whole body leaning backward, his free hand bracing against the horse's side, his feet sliding in the riverbed, and the sound. There was a sound, a wet, ripping sound like Velcro being torn apart, like skin being peeled from a bandage. But the bond held. Marcus pulled, and the sound came, and his hand did not come away, and the horse did not move. It stood, patient and still and dripping, and it did not look at Marcus, did not react to his struggle, did not acknowledge his existence except as a point of contact, a place where its skin met his skin, and the two surfaces had become one. "Marcus," Dean reached him first. He grabbed Marcus's arm, his right arm, the one that was bonded to the horse's flank, and he pulled. And for a moment, Alan thought it might work, because Dean was large, strong, a man who lifted weights and carried people for a living. and his grip on Marcus's arm was solid, and his pull was forceful, and Marcus's body shifted backward an inch, 2 inches. And then Dean's hands did not come away from Marcus's arm. "Dean," Marcus's voice was strained, breathless, the voice of a man who is exerting maximum physical effort and is not making progress. "Dean, what?" "I'm stuck," Dean said, and his voice was different now. Not the cheerful, competent voice of a paramedic, but something quieter, something smaller. The voice of a man who has just realized that the thing he is touching is not the thing he thought he was touching. "I'm stuck to you. My hands are stuck to your arm." "The slime," Fiona said. She was still on the shore, but she had moved forward to the water's edge, and she was staring at the horse with an expression that Alan would later recognize as the expression of a person who has just understood something terrible. "It's the skin. The horse's skin is adhesive, some kind of biological adhesive. When you touch it, you bond to it. It's like a flypaper. The whole animal is a flypaper." "Then don't touch it," Alan shouted, but it was too late because Sienna was already in the water, wading toward her boyfriend, her camera hanging from her neck, her face twisted with fear and love and the desperate need to do something. And she reached Marcus and grabbed his free hand, the left hand, the one that was not bonded to the horse, and she pulled hard, and the sound came again. The wet, ripping sound, the sound of Velcro, of skin, of things that should not be attached being pulled apart, and Marcus screamed, because the pulling was not just mechanical but biological, the adhesive bonding not just to the surface of his skin, but to the layers beneath, to the tissue, to the nerves. And each pull sent a shock of pain through his arm that was not like a cut or a burn but was like something being taken, something being removed, something that was his and was being claimed by the horse. And then Sienna was stuck too. Her hands, which had grabbed Marcus's arm, were now bonded to his sleeve, and the adhesive had transferred, through the fabric, through the cotton, to the skin beneath. And she was locked to Marcus, and Marcus was locked to the horse, and Dean was locked to Marcus, and the three of them stood in the shallows of the loch, connected by a chain of biological adhesive that was strengthening by the second, the bonds deepening, the surfaces merging, and the horse stood at the center of the chain, patient, still, dripping, its dark, liquid eyes fixed on some point in the distance that only it could see. Alan stopped. He was 5 meters away, the water at his thighs, and something in him, the animal part, the part that lives beneath the rational mind, the part that smells smoke before the fire is visible, screamed at him to stop, to not get closer, to not touch any of them, because the adhesive was not just on the horse. It was in the water. He could feel it, a faint, almost imperceptible tackiness on his skin, a slight resistance when he moved his legs, as if the water itself were thickening, were becoming something other than water, were becoming the adhesive, and the adhesive was the loch, and the loch was the horse. And they were all the same thing, all expressions of the same condition, the same property of this place that the locals called the adhesive, and that Alan, standing in the black water with his skin beginning to tingle, understood for the first time was not a metaphor. "Fiona," he shouted, "Fiona, don't come in the water, the adhesive, it's in the water, stay on the shore." Fiona had not moved. She was standing at the water's edge, her face white, her hands clenched at her sides, and she was staring at the horse, and her lips were moving, and Alan could not hear what she was saying over the sound of Marcus's screaming, and the dripping of the mane, and the wet, ripping sounds of 3 people trying to free themselves from something that was not going to let them go. "The Kelpie," Fiona whispered, and this time Alan heard her because the other sounds had stopped. Marcus had stopped screaming, Sienna had stopped pulling, Dean had stopped struggling. And the silence that followed was worse than the noise, because in the silence Alan could hear the dripping of the horse's mane, and the dripping was faster now, the rhythm accelerating, the drops falling like rain on a tin roof, like fingers drumming on a table, like the ticking of a clock that is counting down to something. The horse moved. Chapter 5. It did not run. It did not bolt, did not rear, did not gallop, did not do any of the things that horses do when they move with speed. It simply leaned. It leaned backward toward the deeper water, toward the center of the loch, and because 3 human beings were bonded to its skin, they went with it. They were not dragged. They were carried, the way a coat is carried on a hook, the way a barnacle is carried on a whale, and their bodies moved with the horse's body, their legs walking backward in the water, their feet unable to find purchase on the riverbed. Their arms extended toward the horse, their faces turned toward the shore, toward Alan and Fiona, their mouths open, their eyes wide, their expressions the expressions of people who have just realized in the final, clarifying moment before the end that they are not going to be saved. The horse leaned, and the water deepened. It rose from the horse's knees to its thighs, from its thighs to its belly, from its belly to its chest, and the 3 humans went with it. Marcus bonded to its flank, Dean bonded to Marcus, Sienna bonded to Dean. And the water rose over their waists, their chests, and the cold was immediate. Total, a cold that was not the cold of Scottish water in October, but something deeper, something older, the cold of a place that has not seen the sun in a very long time, the cold of the bottom, of the depths, of the anaerobic dark where things do not live but persist. Marcus was screaming again. Not words, just sound, raw and desperate and muffled by the water that was rising over his mouth, and the scream became a gurgle, and the gurgle became silence, and the water closed over his head, and Alan watched his friend disappear beneath the black surface, and the surface did not froth, did not churn, did not show any sign of the struggle that was happening beneath it. It was smooth. It was still. It was as if the water had swallowed Marcus the way a mouth swallows a piece of food, completely, neatly, without residue. Dean went next. His large, strong body, the body that had carried people from burning buildings and crushed cars, was dragged down the same way, pulled beneath the surface by the horse's descent and the adhesive bond that held him to Marcus, and his face was the last thing visible, his red beard spreading in the water, his eyes wide and staring at the sky, his mouth open in a silent shout, and then he was gone. Sienna lasted the longest. She was at the end of the chain, the last to be bonded, the last to be pulled, and her body was smaller, lighter, and she fought, God, she fought. She kicked, she twisted, she pulled against the bond with a strength that seemed impossible for her frame, and the water rose over her waist, her ribs, her shoulders, and she turned her face to Alan, her beautiful face, her cheekbones, her eyes, and she said one word, clear and distinct and piercing, a word that carried across the water like a thrown stone. Run! And the water took her. The surface went flat. The loch, which had been disturbed by the descent, settled, quickly, unnaturally quickly, the ripples smoothing themselves out as if the water were eager to erase the evidence, as if the loch were a thing that did not want to be seen doing what it had just done. The silence was absolute. No birdsong, no wind, no rain. The world held its breath, and the only sound was the dripping, the steady, rhythmic metronome dripping of the horse's mane, and even that was fading, growing softer, more distant, as the horse descended into the depths with its 3 passengers still bonded to its skin. Alan stood in the water. He was alone. His legs were numb with cold, and his skin was tingling, not just from the cold but from the adhesive, the faint, tacky film that coated the water, that had been seeping into his pores while he stood there watching his friends die, and he could feel it. A slight resistance when he moved his legs, a slight pull, a suggestion of the bond that had taken the others. And he understood that if he did not move, if he stood there 1 second longer, the adhesive would strengthen, and the bond would form, and he would be next. He ran. He turned and ran, and the water fought him. It was thick, heavier than water, denser, more resistant, and his legs moved as if through syrup, and his feet could not find the bottom, and his arms paddled uselessly, and the shore seemed to recede with every step, as if the loch were expanding, were growing, were reaching for him with black, wet hands. But he ran, and the water shallowed, ankle-deep, calf-deep, And then the mud, the rocky, sucking mud of the shore, and his boots found purchase. And he lunged forward, and he was on the rocks, on the dry land, and the water released him. Not with a sound, not with a splash, but with a soft, wet, sucking sound, like a kiss, like a mouth pulling away from skin. He lay on the rocks. He was shaking, not with cold, not with exertion, but with the full-body vibration of a system that has been pushed past its limits and is now oscillating between function and collapse. His breathing was ragged, his vision was blurred, and his skin, his arms, his legs, the parts of his body that had been submerged, was covered with a thin, clear film that glistened in the gray light, and that was warm. He did not notice the film. Not yet. He lay on the rocks and stared at the loch, and the loch stared back, flat, black, still, and somewhere in its depths, 3 people were being held against the skin of a horse, their bodies bonded to its hide, their lungs full of water, and the horse was not drowning them. The horse was doing something else, something slower, something that Alan would not understand until days later, when the film on his thigh had grown to the size of a playing card and the pulling had begun. The horse was feeding. Chapter 6. Fiona found him on the rocks. She had not entered the water. She had stood on the shore, frozen, her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide, her body locked in the paralysis of a person who is watching something happen that is so far beyond the scope of their experience that their mind refuses to process it in real time. She had watched the horse take Marcus, and Dean, and Sienna, and she had not moved, not because she did not care, but because her body had decided in the deep animal part of the brain that governs survival. That movement was death and stillness was life. And she had stood perfectly still, and she had survived. She pulled Alan to his feet. He was heavy dead weight, his body limp with shock, and she was small, but she managed, and they stumbled together along the shore away from the loch, toward the village, and the rain started again, soft, persistent, maddening. And the sound of it on the rocks and the heather and the water was the only sound in the world, because the dripping had stopped. The horse was gone. The shallows were empty. The loch was just a loch again, black water, gray sky, the distant silhouette of mountains. And there was no evidence of what had happened except the 3 sets of footprints in the mud where the water met the land, already filling with rain, already disappearing. They did not speak. They walked. The road was a mile, maybe more, and they walked it in silence, and Alan's legs were heavy, unnaturally heavy, as if the water had left something in them, some residue, some weight, and Fiona walked beside him, her hand on his arm, guiding him, and her face was the face of a person who is holding herself together with nothing but willpower and the knowledge that if she lets go, even for a second, she will shatter. They reached the bothy. Ewan was behind the bar. He looked at them, Alan soaking wet, gray-faced, trembling, Fiona pale, rigid, her eyes too wide, and he set down the glass he was polishing, and his face did not change because his face had been expecting this, had been waiting for this, had been wearing the expression of this moment for years, and now that the moment had arrived, the expression was already in place. "The bridle," he said. It was not a question. "How many?" Fiona asked, and her voice broke on the second word, and she sat down on a bar stool and put her head in her hands and did not cry but made a sound. A low, keening sound, the sound of a pressure valve releasing, the sound of a person whose containment has failed. 3, Alan said. Marcus, Dean, Sienna, they touched it, they got stuck, it pulled them under. Ewan was quiet for a long time. He poured 2 whiskeys and set them on the bar, and neither Alan nor Fiona touched them, and the whiskey sat there, amber in the gray light, and the rain drummed on the roof, and somewhere in the village a dog barked and was silent. "I told ye," Ewan said, and his voice was not angry, not accusatory, but tired, deeply, profoundly tired, the tiredness of a man who has been carrying a knowledge that no one wants and that changes nothing. "I told ye to stay off the water. I told ye not to touch it." "We didn't know," Fiona whispered. "No one ever knows," Ewan said. "That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. The horse comes and it's beautiful and someone touches it and the water takes them and the rest of us bury the empty." "The empty?" Alan asked. "The coffins," Ewan said. "When the bridle takes someone, there's no body to bury, just the empty coffin, the weight of a person without the person. We've buried 12 empties in my lifetime. 13, 14, 15, if you count the ones before I was born." He looked at Alan, and his dark, still eyes were the eyes of the loch, and Alan understood that Ewan was not just a man who lived beside the water. He was a man who was of the water, who had been shaped by it the way the shore had been shaped by it, who had spent 70 years in proximity to the thing in the loch, and had survived not by fighting it but by accepting it, by living in its shadow, by teaching his children and his children's children to stay away from the shallows after dark, and to never, never, never touch the horse. "Can we get them back?" Fiona asked. Ewan looked at her. He looked at her for a long time, and his face was the face of a man who has been asked this question before, and has never found an answer that helps. "What it does to them," he said slowly, "isna quick. The water takes them down, but it dosna drown them, not right away. The skin of the thing, the adhesive, it dosna just hold them, it changes them. It breaks them down, it absorbs them into itself, into the creature. That's why the horse looks so fine, so healthy, so beautiful, because it is wearing them. Their skin, their muscle, whatever they are, whatever makes them them, the creature takes it and adds it to itself, and what's left." He stopped. He poured himself a whiskey and drank it. "What's left is the liver," he said. "The creature dosna eat the liver. It leaves the liver, and the liver comes back. It floats. It bobs up in the shallows a day later, 2 days, and the liver is the only part that the creature canna use, canna absorb. The liver is too much of what we are, too human, too dense with self, and so it spits it back." Fiona stood up. She pushed the bar stool back with a scrape that was too loud in the quiet room, and she walked to the door, and she opened it, and she stepped outside into the rain, and Alan heard her retch. The sound of a person whose body has decided that the contents of the stomach are an intolerable burden and must be expelled. And then she came back, and her face was gray, and she sat down again, and she picked up the whiskey and drank it in one swallow. "How do we kill it?" she asked. Ewan laughed. It was not a pleasant laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has been asked a question whose answer is so obvious and so hopeless that the asking of it is almost funny. "Ye dinna kill the loch," he said. "Ye dinna kill the water. Ye dinna kill what lives in the water, because what lives in the water is the water. The horse is just the shape it wears, the shape it uses to reach us, to touch us, to take us. Kill the horse and the water makes another. Kill the water and, well, ye canna kill the water, it's a loch. It's been here since the ice. It'll be here after we're gone, after all of us are gone." "Then what do we do?" Alan asked. Ewan looked at him, looked at his wet clothes, his gray face, his trembling hands. And then Ewan looked at Alan's legs, at his trousers, still soaked, still dark with the water of the loch, and his eyes narrowed, and his face changed. Not dramatically, not with the sudden sharpness of alarm, but with the slow, deep, sinking recognition of a man who has just seen something he was hoping not to see. "Alan," he said, "your leg." Alan looked down. His left thigh, where the water had reached highest, where the adhesive film had been thickest, was covered with a thin, translucent sheen. Not water, not any more. The water had evaporated or been absorbed or had done whatever water does when it has served its purpose, and what remained was the film. The clear, elastic, slightly warm film that Alan would spend the next 3 days trying to scrub from his skin with a pumice stone. "Ah," Ewan said, and the sound was not a word but a sigh that carried the weight of 70 years and 12 empty coffins and the knowledge that the 13th was already being built. "Ah, lad, the adhesive, it's got hold of ye." "What do you mean?" Alan asked, and his voice was too calm, too level, the voice of a man who is not yet ready to hear the answer. "I mean," Ewan said, "that the creature has touched ye. Not the way it touched your friends, not fully, not yet, but enough to leave a mark, enough to leave a thread. And the thread, well, the thread pulls, doesn't it? Ye can feel it already, canna ye? The pull, toward the water, toward the loch, toward the creature. Alan stared at him, and then slowly, like a man acknowledging a pain he has been trying to ignore, he nodded. I can feel it, he said. I thought it was in my head. Trauma, shock, but it's real, it's physical. It's like a magnet in my leg pulling toward the loch. Ewan said. That's the adhesive, that's how it keeps them, even the ones who get away, even the ones who don't touch the horse directly. The water carries it, the water is it. And if it touches ye, if it gets on your skin, it starts to work. Slowly, it takes days, maybe weeks, but it doesn't stop, it never stops. The pull gets stronger, the film grows, and eventually... Eventually I go back, Alan said. Ewan did not answer. He did not need to. The answer was in his face, in his dark, still, fathomless eyes, in the way he looked at Alan, the way a man looks at a person who has been diagnosed with a terminal illness. Not with pity exactly, but with the quiet, respectful sorrow of a person who knows that there is nothing to be done, that the diagnosis is the prognosis, and that the only question that remains is not whether but when. Alan looked at his thigh. The film glistened. It was warm, and beneath it, so faintly that he might have been imagining it, he could feel a pulse, a rhythm, a beat, a countdown that matched exactly with perfect, terrible precision the dripping of the horse's mane. Chapter 7. Fiona left the next morning. She took the first bus out of Kinlochmore, the same bus that came twice a week, that connected the village to the nearest town, that was the only route to the world beyond the glen, and she did not look back. Alan watched her go, standing in the rain outside the bothy, and she did not wave, did not say goodbye, did not do anything but climb onto the bus and sit in the first seat and stare straight ahead with the fixed, rigid posture of a person who has decided that survival is more important than dignity, and that the best thing she can do is put as much distance as possible between herself and the loch. Alan understood. He did not blame her. He would have left too if he could. But the pull... He tried to leave. He packed his bag, walked to the bus stop and stood in the rain, and the bus came and the door opened, and he put his foot on the first step and the pull hit him. A physical, muscular, structural pull, as if a rope had been attached to his left thigh and someone behind him had yanked it. He stumbled. He grabbed the rail of the bus and held on, and the pull intensified, not just in his thigh but in his whole left side, in his hip, in his ribs, in his shoulder, as if the film were spreading, were reaching deeper into his body, were claiming more territory, and the pain was extraordinary. A tearing, rending pain, as if his muscles were being pulled from his bones, and he let go of the rail and staggered backward, and the pull released, and he stood in the rain, and the bus drove away, and Alan understood that the adhesive would not let him leave. He went back to the bothy. Ewan was behind the bar. He did not look up. It didn't let ye go, Ewan said. No. It never does, not once it has hold. The ones who try well, they make it worse. They pull and the adhesive spreads faster and the pull gets stronger. Best thing ye can do, best thing anyone can do is stay still. Stay calm, don't fight it. And wait for it to take me. Or wait for it to pass, Ewan said, and his voice was careful, measured, the voice of a man choosing his words the way a surgeon chooses an incision point. Sometimes it passes. Sometimes the body fights it off. The adhesive isna alive, not exactly. It's more like a residue, a secretion. And sometimes, if ye are strong enough, if ye wait long enough, the body's own defenses will break it down, absorb it, like a splinter working its way out. How often does that happen? Alan asked. Ewan looked at him. He did not answer. The answer was in his silence. Chapter 8. Alan stayed. There was nothing else to do. He could not leave. The pull would not let him, and he could not fight the adhesive. The pumice stone had proven that, and he could not call for help, because the village had no mobile signal and the nearest phone was the bothy's landline, and when he tried to call the police, Ewan had gently taken the receiver from his hand and set it back in its cradle. What would ye tell them? Ewan asked. that a horse in the loch took your friends, that the water is sticky, that there's a film on your leg that's pulling ye toward the black water. They'd send a doctor, lad, not the kind ye want. Alan sat in the bothy. He sat by the peat fire, and the old men sat by the peat fire, and they did not speak to him, and he did not speak to them. And the rain fell, and the days passed, and the film on his thigh grew. It grew slowly at first. On the first day it was the size of a playing card. On the second, the size of a paperback book. On the third, it had spread to his knee, and the pull was stronger. Not just a tug now, but a drag. A constant, insistent force that made sitting still an effort, that made walking toward the bothy's door, which faced southeast, away from the loch, feel like walking uphill, that made walking toward the window, which faced northwest, toward the loch, feel like walking downhill, like falling, like the loch was at the bottom of a slope and gravity was doing what gravity does. He scrubbed. He could not help it. The pumice stone was the only weapon he had, and even though it did not work, even though the film stretched and snapped back and spread a little more each time he scrubbed, he used it, because the alternative was to sit and do nothing and feel the film growing and the pull strengthening and the countdown ticking, and doing something, even something useless, was better than doing nothing. On the third evening, Ewan came to sit beside him. The old man had been keeping his distance, not out of coldness but out of caution, the caution of a man who knows that the adhesive can spread through contact and who does not want to become its next host. But on the third evening he sat down and he poured 2 whiskies and he gave one to Alan and he said, "I want to tell ye something, lad, something I dinna usually tell, but ye are not going to be here much longer, one way or the other, and I think someone should know." Alan looked at him. The whiskey was warm in his hand, and the fire was warm on his face, and his thigh was warm where the film had spread, and the warmth of the film was the worst of the 3, because it was not the warmth of comfort but the warmth of growth, of something alive, of something that was becoming part of him. "Adhesive isna just a secretion," Ewan said. "It's the creature's, well, think of it as a fishing line. The horse is the lure, the water is the line, and the adhesive, the film on your skin, that's the hook. It goes in and it holds and it reels ye in. But here's the thing, the hook isna just in your skin, it's in your blood, in your bones. Ye can scrub the surface off, but the hook is deeper than the surface. It's in ye and it's connected to the loch, and the loch is connected to the creature, and the creature." He stopped, he drank his whiskey. "The creature is hungry," he said. "It's always hungry. It takes people because it needs them, not for food, not exactly, for mass, for substance. The horse ye saw, the beautiful black stallion, that's not the creature's real form. The creature doesna have a real form, it's just the water, the adhesive, the pull. The horse is a shape it makes from the people it's taken. Their skin, their muscle, their everything. It builds the horse from the dead, and the horse lures the living, and the living become the dead, and the dead become the horse, and it goes on. It's been going on since before there were people in this glen. Since before there were people at all. Since the ice retreated and the loch was born and something moved into the dark water and began to wait." "And the adhesive on my leg," Alan said. I'm part of the fishing line now." "Aye, and the line is reeling ye in." "How long?" Ewan looked at Alan's thigh. The film had spread to his knee and the edges were feathered and the skin beneath was softer, wetter, and the pull was visible. You could see it, if you watch closely, the way the fabric of his trousers shifted slightly, constantly, toward the northwest, toward the loch, as if an invisible hand were tugging at the material. "A week," Ewan said. "Maybe 2 if ye are strong, but the pull will get worse. It'll start in your sleep. Ye'll walk in your sleep, toward the water, toward the shallows, toward the horse. And one night ye'll wake up in the water and the film will have spread over your whole body and the adhesive will have bonded ye to the creature and the water will close over your head and that will be the end." Alan stared at the fire. The peat burned slowly, giving off a thick, fragrant smoke that smelled of earth and heather and the deep, ancient past of the Highlands, and the smoke curled up the chimney and out into the rain, and the rain fell on the loch, and the loch was black and still and patient. "There has to be a way," Alan said. "There has to be something, some way to break the hook, some way to cut the line." Ewan was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled, the old men dozed, the rain drummed. "There is one thing," Ewan said finally. "I didn't know if it works, I've never seen it done. But the old stories, the really old ones, the ones my grandmother told me, the ones that were old when she was young, they say that the adhesive has a weakness, one thing it can't hold against." "What?" "Peat," Ewan said. "Not just any peat. The peat from the deepest part of the bog, the peat that's been under the water for 1,000 years, the peat that's more mineral than plant, that's been compressed and decomposed until it's almost stone. That peat, the black peat, the old peat, has something in it. A chemical, an enzyme, something that breaks down the adhesive. It's why the creature Dosna come onto the land is peat, the soil is peat, and the peat fights the adhesive. The creature can't cross the peat. It can only exist in the water and on the shore where the peat is thin." "Where?" Alan asked. "Where is this peat?" Ewan looked at him and his dark eyes were grave. "The bog, the deep bog on the north side of the glen. There's a place, a pool, a sinkhole where the peat is exposed at the bottom. It's a day's walk, maybe more in the rain, and ye'll have to fight the pull the whole way. Every step north will be a battle. Every step away from the loch will be like walking into a wind that wants to push ye back. But if ye can reach the bog, if ye can get to the peat, if ye can cover the film, cover the adhesive with the old peat, it might break the hook. It might sever the line." "Might." "Might, I didn't know. No one's ever tried. No one who had the adhesive has ever been strong enough or stubborn enough to try." Alan looked at his thigh. The film pulsed. The pull dragged. And somewhere in the black water of the loch something was waiting, patient, hungry, ancient, with 3 new passengers still bonded to its skin, their bodies being slowly, methodically broken down and absorbed, their nutrients feeding the creature's mass, their forms adding to the horse's beauty, and the horse would emerge again. Someday soon in the shallows, dripping, waiting, beautiful, and someone else would touch it, and the cycle would continue. Alan stood up. His legs shook, the left one more than the right, the pull making it tremble, making it feel as if the leg were not entirely his own, as if it belonged to something else, something that was slowly, patiently reeling him in. "I'll go," he said. "Tomorrow at dawn I'll go to the bog." Ewan nodded. He poured another whiskey. He handed it to Alan. "Dawn then," he said, and Alan. "Yes." "If the peat dosna work, if the adhesive holds, if ye feel the pull getting stronger instead of weaker." "What?" "Run south. Run as far and as fast as ye can. The pull has a range. If ye can get far enough, 50 miles, 60, maybe more, the pull will fade. The adhesive will ye'll always carry it, always, it willna leave ye, but if ye are far enough the pull canna reach the loch. The line willna be long enough. Ye'll be free. Not safe, never safe, but free." "And if I can't run far enough?" Ewan did not answer. He poured himself another whiskey and stared into the fire, and the fire burned, and the rain fell, and the loch waited, and Alan stood in the bothy with a film on his leg and a pull in his bones, and the knowledge that tomorrow he would walk into the Highlands, into the rain, into the pull, and he would fight every step of the way, because the alternative was to walk into the water. And the water was patient, and the water was hungry, and the water was not going to stop. Chapter 9. The dawn was not a dawn. In Kinlochmore, the dawn was merely a gradual shift in the quality of the darkness, from black to gray, from the darkness of night to the darkness of a sky so heavy with cloud that it seemed the sun existed behind it only as a rumor, a suggestion, a thing that other places had but that this glen had misplaced or never owned. Alan stood outside the bothy at 5 in the morning, his backpack on his shoulders, his boots already sinking into the mud, and the rain fell on him, soft, persistent, interminable, and the pull was there. It was always there. He had not slept, not properly, not in the way that sleep is supposed to restore the body and the mind. But he had lain on the bed in the bothy and stared at the ceiling and felt the pull dragging at his left side like an anchor, and the film on his thigh had pulsed in the dark with its own rhythm, and he had understood that the thing on his skin was not sleeping either, that it did not sleep, that it was a process, not a creature, and processes do not rest. He had prepared. Ewan had given him what he could, a rough hand-drawn map of the glen with the bog marked in a shaky X on the north side, a pair of heavy wool gloves and a warning, cover your skin, every inch. The adhesive canna bond through cloth not fully. It slows it down, gives ye time. Alan had wrapped his left thigh in 3 layers of cloth, a bandage from Dean's first aid kit, a towel, and a strip torn from a bedsheet. And the wrapping had helped, not by stopping the pull but by muffling it, reducing it from a scream to a persistent, grating hum that he could almost, if he concentrated on other things, ignore. He walked. The road south, the road to the bus stop, to the world, was behind him, and he walked north, away from the village, away from the bothy, away from the warmth and the whiskey and the old men by the fire, and the pull fought him. It did not fight him the way a person fights, with resistance, with opposition, with force applied against force. It fought him the way a current fights a swimmer, passively, constantly, with the patient, exhausting pressure of a force that never relents and never tires. His left leg was heavier than his right. Not much, heavier by a fraction, by a margin so small that a stranger would not have noticed, but Alan noticed because the weight was not constant. It pulsed. It grew heavier when he stepped away from the loch, lighter when he stepped toward it. It was a tide, a magnetic pull, a gravity that had nothing to do with the mass of the earth and everything to do with the mass of the thing in the water. The glen opened before him. The mountains rose on either side, gray, treeless, their slopes covered in heather and bracken and the dark, soggy patches of bog that made the ground treacherous, that made every step a negotiation between boot and earth. The loch was behind him, and as he walked north it fell below the ridge out of sight, and for a moment, a brief, glorious, treacherous moment, the pull lessened. His left leg felt lighter. His step quickened. He felt a surge of something that was almost hope, and he walked faster, and the rain fell harder, and the wind picked up, and the heather bent under it, and Alan Cooper walked into the Highlands with a parasite on his leg and a prayer in his heart, and the knowledge that the loch was behind him and the bog was ahead, and the distance between the two was the most important distance he would ever cross. The first hour was the easiest. The pull was steady but manageable, a constant drag on his left side, like walking with a weight in his pocket. The terrain was rough but passable, a track, barely visible, winding through the heather, crossing small streams on stones that were slick with rain. The landscape was vast and empty and beautiful in the way that desolate places are beautiful, with the beauty of absence, of space, of a land that has been abandoned by everything except the weather and the heather and the rain. In the second hour the pull changed. It did not increase, not in intensity, not in force. It changed in character. The steady, constant drag became rhythmic, a pulse, a beat, a throb that matched the rhythm of the film on his thigh, and the rhythm was not his heartbeat. It was something else's heartbeat, something distant, something in the water, and the rhythm was not random. It was a pattern. Alan could feel it, could count it, could predict it, and the pattern was not mechanical. It was biological. It was the rhythm of a living thing that was breathing, that was contracting and expanding, that was calling. The call was not a sound. It was not a voice, not a word, not anything that could be heard with ears. It was a sensation, a pull that went beyond the muscular, beyond the physical, into the psychological, into the deep animal part of the brain that governs instinct and survival, and the ancient pre-verbal knowledge that tells a creature when it is being hunted. The call said, come back to the water. The water is warm. The water is safe. The water is where you belong. Come back and the pulling will stop and the pain will end and you will be held and you will be absorbed and you will become part of something larger and older and more permanent than the small, fragile, temporary thing you call yourself. Alan walked. He walked through the call, through the pull, through the rain, and his left leg dragged, and his teeth clenched, and the film on his thigh pulsed, and he did not look back. In the third hour he saw the horse. Chapter 10. It was standing in a stream. Not the loch. The stream was a small, narrow watercourse that ran down from the mountains, barely more than a trickle, and the horse was standing in it, its hooves in the shallow water, its body silhouetted against the gray sky. It was the same horse, jet black, mirror smooth, its mane dripping with that same metronomic rhythm. And it was not in the loch, it was here, in a stream that ran across Alan's path, between him and the bog, as if the creature had anticipated his route, had projected his trajectory, had placed itself not as a barrier but as an option, a choice, a temptation, a beautiful, terrible thing standing in the water with its dark, liquid eyes and its dripping mane and the unspoken invitation of its stillness. Alan stopped. The pull intensified, the film on his thigh throbbed, and the rhythm of the call accelerated, and his left leg took a step forward without his permission, a single, involuntary step toward the stream, toward the horse, toward the water. He caught himself. He dug his right foot into the mud and held, and his left leg trembled, caught between his will and the creature's pull. And the horse stood in the stream and did not move and did not speak and did not do anything but exist, beautifully, perfectly, in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Alan understood that the creature was not here to take him. It was here to test him, to see how strong the hook was, to see if the adhesive had done its work, if the pull was strong enough to overcome the will, if the line was short enough that the reel could begin. He went around. He left the track and plunged into the heather, thick, wet, waist-high, grabbing at his legs, his clothes, his pack, and he pushed through it, away from the stream, away from the horse, and the heather fought him the way everything in this place fought him, with the passive, relentless resistance of a landscape that did not want him to pass. But he passed. He fought through the heather, his legs burning, his left side screaming with the pull, and he came out on the other side, onto a patch of open moorland, and the stream was behind him, and the horse was still standing in the water, and it had not moved, had not pursued, had not done anything but watch him go with those dark, liquid eyes, and Alan did not look back. The fourth hour, the fifth, the rain did not stop. Alan's clothes were soaked through, his boots were heavy with mud, and the film on his thigh had grown despite the wrapping. The bandage and the towel and the bedsheet were damp, and the adhesive was spreading through the moisture, reaching beyond the original patch, extending its territory, and the pull was no longer just in his thigh. It was in his knee, in his calf, in his ankle. It was in his entire left leg, and the leg was no longer merely heavy. It was disobedient, moving in directions he did not choose, taking steps he did not command, and the battle between his will and the adhesive had become a battle for his body, a war fought in the muscles and the nerves and the synapses, and the adhesive was winning. He fell. It was not a trip or a stumble, it was a collapse, his left leg simply refusing to bear weight, buckling at the knee, and he went down into the heather and the mud, and the rain fell on his face, and he lay there. He lay there for a long time. The pull was constant now, not rhythmic but continuous, a steady, unbroken drag toward the south, toward the loch, toward the water, and the call was not a call anymore but a command, and the command was simple: get up, walk south, go home. Alan got up. He did not walk south. He walked north. He walked with his right leg doing the work of two legs, dragging the left, and his hands gripping the heather on either side, pulling himself forward, and the progress was slow, 20 meters, 10-5. But it was progress, it was north, it was away, and the bog was ahead. Ewan had said the bog was ahead, and the bog was the answer, the old peat, the deep peat, the thing that the adhesive could not hold against. The sixth hour. The rain changed, grew harder, colder, driven by a wind that came from the north and cut through his clothes like a blade. Alan was shivering, not just from cold but from the effort, from the sustained, superhuman effort of walking against a force that was pulling him south with every step, and his vision was blurring, and his thoughts were fragmenting, and the call was louder now, so loud that it was not a call but a roar, a soundless roar that filled his skull and his chest and his bones, and the roar said, "Come home, come home, come home, come home." And then the ground changed. He felt it before he saw it. The heather thinning, the ground softening, the mud becoming something other than mud, something darker, something richer, something that smelled of decomposition and age and the deep, slow chemistry of 1,000 years of organic matter being compressed and broken down and transformed. The bog. He had reached the bog. He crawled. His legs were gone, both of them, not just the left had given out, the right from exhaustion, the left from the adhesive. And he crawled on his hands and knees through the heather and onto the bog, and the bog was soft. Not mud soft, but sponge soft, yielding, the surface of it trembling under his weight like a living thing. And beneath the surface was water, dark, tea-colored water, the color of strong tea, of old whiskey, of the tannins of 1,000 years of peat. And the water was warm. Not warm like the adhesive was warm, warm in a different way, a healthier way, the warmth of decomposition, of biological activity, of a living ecosystem of microbes and enzymes, and the slow, patient chemistry of organic matter being transformed into something else. The warmth of peat, the warmth that Ewan had said was the adhesive's weakness. Alan dug. He drove his hands into the surface of the bog, into the dark, waterlogged peat, and the peat gave way, and beneath the surface layer was a deeper layer, darker, denser, older, the peat that had been at the bottom of the bog for centuries, compressed and decomposed until it was almost mineral, almost stone, and it was black. Not the black of the loch, not the dead, lightless black of anaerobic water, but a living black, a rich black, the black of carbon, of coal, of the earth's own chemistry at work. He pulled the peat up. It came in chunks, thick, heavy, gelatinous chunks that were more solid than liquid, more mineral than organic, and he pressed it against his thigh, against the film, against the adhesive. The pain was immediate and extraordinary. Not the pain of the adhesive. That pain was a pulling, a dragging, a persistent, nagging ache. This pain was a burning, a chemical burn, a reaction, the adhesive and the peat meeting and fighting, two substances that were fundamentally incompatible, that could not coexist, that reacted with each other the way acid reacts with base. And the reaction was violent, and the reaction was in his skin, in his flesh, in the tissue beneath the adhesive. And Alan screamed, a raw, ragged scream that was swallowed by the rain and the wind and the vast, empty silence of the Highlands. He held the peat against his thigh. He pressed it into the film, and the film reacted. He could feel it, could feel the adhesive recoiling, contracting, pulling back from the peat, the way a hand pulls back from a hot surface, and the clear, translucent film was changing color, going from clear to cloudy, from cloudy to opaque, from opaque to a sickly, brownish-white, and it was dying. The peat was killing it. The enzyme, the chemical, whatever it was that Ewan had described, the ancient mineralized compound of 1,000 years of compressed organic matter, it was breaking down the adhesive, dissolving the bonds, severing the hook from the line and the pull. The pull was weakening. Alan sobbed. He pressed the peat harder against his thigh, and the pain intensified and the pull weakened further, and he could feel the connection. The invisible, intangible, biological connection between the film on his skin and the creature in the loch, stretching, fraying, thinning, and he dug deeper into the bog, pulling up chunks of the old peat, packing them against his leg, wrapping the bandage and the towel and the bedsheet around the peat to hold it in place. And the pain was blinding, staggering, a white-hot agony that made the world go dim and narrow, but the pull was fading, fading, gone. Alan collapsed face first into the bog. He lay there, half submerged in the dark, warm, tea-colored water, his leg packed with peat, his body shaking with pain and cold and the aftermath of a battle that had been fought in his muscles and his nerves and his skin. And the rain fell on his back, and the wind blew across the moor, and somewhere to the south, in a loch in a glen in the Scottish Highlands, something felt its hook being torn from its prey, and it clicked. And the clicking was not measured and patient but angry, a rapid, furious, wet chittering that rose from the water and echoed off the mountains and carried across the heather like a scream. And the horse in the shallows reared its head and let out a sound that was not a neigh and not a scream, but something between the two. Something that was the sound of a thing that has been feeding for millennia and has just been denied. Chapter 11. Alan lay in the bog for hours. He did not sleep. Sleep was impossible, the pain was too great. But he lay there, and the rain fell, and the peat worked, and the film on his thigh died. It did not die quickly. It died the way the peat itself had been made, slowly through chemistry, through the patient, molecular process of one substance breaking down another. The clear, translucent film turned cloudy, then opaque, then dry and flaky, and it peeled away from his skin in thin, papery strips that dissolved in the bog water, and beneath the dead film his skin was raw red, blistered, tender as a burn, but it was his skin, not the creature's, not the adhesives, his. When he could move, when the pain had subsided from blinding to merely terrible and his legs would bear weight again, he stood. He was unsteady. The world tilted and swayed, and his vision was gray at the edges, and his body was a catalogue of complaints, cold, wet, exhausted, battered, burned, and alive. Alive. The word had never felt so heavy or so precise. He looked south. The mountains were there, and the glen was there, and somewhere beyond the ridge the loch was there, black, still, patient, eternal, and the pull was gone. The film was gone. The hook was gone. He was free. Not safe. Ewan had said that, never safe but free, and Alan understood now what the old man had meant. The creature was still in the loch. It would always be in the loch. The adhesive was still in the water, and the water was still in the highlands, and the horse would appear again in the shallows, dripping, wading, beautiful, and someone else would touch it, and the cycle would continue. Alan had escaped the hook, but the hook was not the creature. The hook was just the line. The creature was the loch, and the loch was the water, and the water was the world, and there was no escaping the world. He walked south. The walk back was easier, not because the terrain was different, but because the pull was gone and his legs were his own, and every step was a step he chose to take, not a step he was forced to take, and the difference between those two things, between walking because you want to and walking because you are being dragged, was the difference between freedom and captivity, between life and death, between being a person and being a component of something else. He reached Kinlochmore in the evening. The bothy was lit, warm yellow light in the windows, the smoke of peat rising from the chimney, and Ewan was behind the bar, and the old men were by the fire, and the rain was falling, and the world was the same world it had always been, and Alan walked in, and Ewan looked at him. And Ewan's face changed from the tired, resigned expression of a man who has written someone off to something else, something that Alan, in his exhaustion and his pain, could not identify, because it was an expression he had never seen on Ewan's face before. It was hope. "Ye did it," Ewan said. "The peat." "The peat," Alan confirmed. He sat down on a bar stool, and his legs gave out, and he almost fell, and Ewan caught him, and the old man's hands were strong and warm and dry, and Alan leaned against the bar and breathed, and the breathing was the best breathing he had ever done, because every breath was a breath that was not a breath taken underwater. "Stay the night," Ewan said. "Tomorrow the bus. Get yourself to Inverness. Get yourself to London. Get yourself as far from this glen as ye can, and dinna come back. Not ever, not for any reason. The creature will remember ye, Alan. It remembers everyone who gets away. And it—" He stopped. "It what?" Alan asked. "It looks for them," Ewan said. "Not actively, not hunting, but passively. The water carries the adhesive, and the adhesive carries the memory, the scent. And if ye are ever near black water again, any black water, any loch, any river, any pool, and the water carries the old adhesive, it'll find ye. It'll know ye, and the pull will start again." Alan looked at his thigh. The skin was raw and blistered, and the peat was still packed against it, held in place by the wrapping, and the pain was enormous, and the pain was beautiful, because the pain was the pain of healing, the pain of a body that has been invaded and has fought off the invader, and the scars that remained were not marks of damage but marks of survival. "I understand," he said. Ewan poured him a whiskey. Alan drank it. The old men by the fire looked at him with expressions that were, for the first time, something other than passive resignation, expressions that contained a flicker of something that might have been respect, or recognition, or the particular Highland acknowledgement of a man who has looked into the black water and come back. Alan slept that night. He slept deeply, dreamlessly, the sleep of a body that has been pushed to its absolute limit and has been given permission to shut down. And when he woke, the rain was falling and the room was gray and his thigh was on fire, and the fire was the best thing he had ever felt. Chapter 12. He left on the morning bus. The bus came twice a week and it came at 7, and Alan was standing at the stop at 6, his bag on his shoulder, his leg wrapped in fresh bandages, the peat still packed against the raw skin, and Ewan stood beside him, and the old men stood in the doorway of the bothy, and the rain fell and the mountains were gray, and the loch was somewhere beyond the ridge, black and still and patient, and Alan did not look toward it. "Thank you," Alan said. Ewan nodded. He did not say "you're welcome" or "good luck" or "be safe." He said nothing. He simply stood, his dark eyes watching the road, his face the weathered, tired, indomitable face of a man who had lived his entire life in the shadow of the thing in the water and who would live the rest of it there, because the loch was his home, and the loch was the creature, and you do not leave your home because it is dangerous. You learn its rules. You stay away from the shallows. You do not touch the horse. And when the horse takes someone, you bury the empty and you mourn and you wait, and you hope that the next time the horse appears, the person who sees it will listen when you say don't touch it and will walk the other way. The bus came. Alan climbed on. The driver was a young woman with red hair and a face that was not unfriendly but was not warm, the face of a person who drives the same route twice a week through the same rain to the same places and has long since stopped seeing the scenery. She did not speak. Alan sat in the first seat, the seat where Fiona had sat 3 days ago, and the bus pulled away and Alan did not look back. He looked back. He did not mean to. His eyes moved, drawn by something, a force, a gravity, a pull that was not physical but psychological, the pull of a thing that has marked you, that has left its signature in your body, that has bonded with you and been torn away and has not forgotten. He looked back through the rear window of the bus, through the rain, through the gray, and he saw the glen, the mountains, the heather, the road winding away, and beyond the ridge, barely visible, a sliver of black water. The loch, still, flat, a mirror in the landscape, reflecting nothing, absorbing everything. And on the shore, at the place where the water met the land, at the shallows, at the exact spot where Marcus had walked into the water 3 days ago, a figure. Small, dark, standing in the water, not moving, dripping. The horse. It was watching the bus. Its dark, liquid eyes were fixed on the road, on the vehicle, on the man inside the vehicle who had been hooked and had torn himself free, and the horse was not angry. It was not capable of anger, not in the way that humans understand anger, but it was aware. It knew. It knew that Alan had escaped, and it knew where he was going, and it would remember the way the water remembers, the way the loch remembers, the way the adhesive remembers, and someday, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not this year, maybe not in this decade, Alan would be near black water again, and the water would carry the old adhesive, and the adhesive would carry the memory, and the pull would start. The bus turned a corner, and the loch was gone, and the horse was gone, and the glen was gone, and Alan sat in his seat and breathed, and his thigh throbbed. Not with the pull, not with the adhesive's pulse, but with the honest, clean, human pain of a wound that was healing. And he put his hand over the bandage, and he felt the peat beneath it, and the peat was warm, and the warmth was the warmth of the earth, of the bog, of the ancient, patient chemistry that had saved his life. He was free. He was not safe. He would never be safe. But he was free, and freedom, Alan understood, sitting on a bus in the rain in the Scottish Highlands with a wound on his leg and a memory in his bones, and the image of a black horse standing in the shallows burned into the back of his skull. Freedom was enough. Freedom was everything. The bus drove south. The rain fell. The highlands receded in the rearview mirror, gray and vast and ancient and full of water, and the water was black, and the black water was patient, and the patient water was waiting, and it would wait forever, because waiting was what it did, and waiting was what it was, and the horse would appear again, and someone would touch it. And the water would take them, and the liver would float, and the empty coffin would be buried, and the rain would fall, and the cycle would continue, and the loch would be there long after Alan Cooper was gone, long after Kinlochmore was gone, long after the last person who remembered the name Loch and t-Sluagh was gone, because the loch was not a place. The loch was a condition, the loch was the adhesive, the loch was the water, and the water always wins. Epilogue. 3 months later, Alan was in his flat in London. It was a Tuesday evening. He was sitting on his sofa, watching the rain fall against the window, not the soft, persistent rain of the Highlands, but the hard, sudden, theatrical rain of a London autumn, the kind that comes with thunder and leaves with the sunset. His thigh had healed. The skin where the film had been was still discolored, a patch of pink, slightly translucent skin that was smoother than the surrounding tissue, that caught the light differently, that felt, when he touched it, slightly tacky, as if the adhesive had left a ghost of itself behind, a memory in the cells, a trace in the tissue. He had not been near black water since Kinlochmore. He had not swum, had not visited any lochs, had not walked along any rivers. He had taken baths instead of showers because the sound of running water reminded him of the dripping, the metronome, the heartbeat, the countdown, and he could not bear it. He had seen a therapist, a trauma counselor, a woman named Dr. Patel who specialized in PTSD, and who listened to his account of the loch with the professional, neutral attention of a person who has heard many impossible stories and has learned to treat them all as true. And the therapy had helped, in the way that therapy helps, which is not by erasing the memory, but by teaching the mind to carry it without being crushed by its weight. He was watching the rain. The flat was warm, central heating, double-glazed windows, the full arsenal of modern comfort that a city provides against the elements, and the television was on, a documentary about the Scottish Highlands, and Alan was not watching it, not really, but it was on. And the images on the screen were of mountains and glens and lochs, and the narrator was talking about the geology, the history, the beauty of the landscape, and Alan was thinking about Ewan, and the bothy, and the old men by the fire, and the peat, and the bog, and the horse. And then the documentary showed a loch, a blackwater loch in a remote glen in the Highlands. The narrator said its name. The name was not Loch and t-Sluagh, it was a different loch, a different glen, but the water was the same, black, still, flat, a mirror reflecting nothing. And Alan's thigh twitched. It was not a pull, not a drag, not the relentless magnetic force that had nearly dragged him into the water 3 months ago. It was a twitch, a flutter, a whisper. The ghost of the adhesive, the memory in the cells, the trace in the tissue, responding to the image on the screen, to the sight of black water, to the proximity, visual, not physical, but the body does not always distinguish between the two of the thing that had marked him. Alan turned off the television. He sat in the silence of his flat, and the rain fell against the window, and his thigh was still, and the twitch did not repeat, and he told himself it was nothing. A muscle spasm, a phantom sensation, the body's memory playing tricks on the mind. He told himself that, and he almost believed it. But that night when he lay in bed, when the flat was dark and the rain was falling and the city was quiet, Alan dreamed. He dreamed of black water, still and flat, and of a horse standing in the shallows, jet black, mirror smooth, its mane dripping with a rhythm that was not mechanical but biological, a heartbeat, a countdown, a pulse that matched exactly with perfect, terrible precision, the faint, almost imperceptible twitch in the skin of his left thigh. And in the dream, the horse turned its head and looked at him, and its eyes were dark and liquid and vast, and they were not angry, and they were not hungry, and they were not vengeful. They were patient. They were the eyes of a thing that has been in the water since the ice retreated and will be in the water when the ice returns. A thing that does not hunt but waits, that does not chase but calls, that does not forget because it cannot forget because forgetting is a property of the living, and the thing in the water is not alive in the way that things are alive, but is a condition of the water, a feature of the place, as permanent as the stones and the rain and the dark. And in the dream, Alan heard the dripping, drip, 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 each drop identical, each drop a heartbeat, each drop a countdown, and the countdown was not at 0, the countdown was not at 1. The countdown was somewhere in between, ticking, ticking, dripping, dripping, and the horse was waiting, and the water was waiting, and the adhesive was waiting in the cells of his skin, in the memory of his body, in the ghost of the thing that had bonded with him and been torn away, and had left its signature in his flesh like a scar, like a brand, like a mark that says you were mine once, and you will be mine again. Alan woke. The flat was dark, the rain had stopped, his thigh was still. But when he put his hand on it, on the patch of pink, translucent skin where the film had been, he could feel it. Faint, almost nothing, a warmth, a pulse, a thread. The thread pulled south. The Liver's Wake. Chapter 1. The loch did not remember the names of the dead. It did not need to. It had been swallowing people since before the first crofter built the first stone hut on its shore, since before the first Gaelic word was spoken in the glen, since before the ice retreated and left behind this black, deep, hungry basin carved into the granite like a socket carved into a skull. The loch was old. The loch was patient. The loch did not distinguish between the man who drowned in 1742 and the woman who drowned in 1937 and the boy who would drown tomorrow, because to the loch they were all the same thing, warmth. Warmth that sank beneath the surface and dissolved into the cold. Warmth that the loch had been collecting, particle by particle, heartbeat by heartbeat, for 10,000 years, and the loch was not yet full, and the loch would never be full, because the hunger of deep water is the one hunger that cannot be satisfied. On this particular morning, a morning in late October, gray and wet and featureless, the kind of morning that the Highlands produce the way a factory produces goods, mechanically and without variation, a liver floated in the shallows. It was human. It was pale. It had the color and texture of something that had been boiled too long, gray-white, rubbery, slightly translucent at the edges, the vessels collapsed and empty, the lobes misshapen from its time in the water. It was not large. It had shrunk in the cold, the tissue contracting, the cells expelling their last reserves of fluid, and it sat in the shallows like a discarded bath toy, bobbing with the tiny, imperceptible motion of water that is not moving but is not still either, water that is breathing, water that has a pulse. The liver orbited a boot. The boot was a hiking boot, brown leather, size 11, the sole separated from the upper at the heel, the laces untied and trailing in the water like the tendrils of some aquatic plant. The boot floated face down, and the liver circled it in a slow, elliptical pattern, and the orbit was not caused by wind or current. There was no wind, and the current in the shallows was negligible, but by something else, something that operated on a principle that was not physics, something that drew the liver to the boot the way a compass needle is drawn to north, the way a moth is drawn to flame, the way a drowning man is drawn to the surface. There was no body. There was no blood. There was no sign of struggle, no torn clothing, no scattered belongings, no evidence that a human being had been here and had been taken, only the boot and the liver, circling each other in the gray shallows of a loch that did not remember names. A hand rose from the water. It came up slowly, the fingers first, long, gray, slightly webbed between the knuckles, the skin not skin but a smooth, wet membrane that caught the flat light and held it, and then the palm, and then the wrist, and the hand moved through the air above the surface with the unhurried precision of a thing that has done this before and will do it again, and does not need to rush because the liver is not going anywhere. The liver is not going anywhere because the liver belongs to the hand, belongs to the water, belongs to the loch, and the hand is simply retrieving what it left behind. The fingers closed around the organ, gently, almost lovingly, the way a hand closes around a possession that has been misplaced and has finally been found. And then the hand sank and the liver sank with it, and the water closed over both without a sound, not a splash, not a gurgle, not the smallest disturbance of the surface. And the shallows were empty, and the boot floated, and the rain fell, and the loch was still, and the morning continued as if nothing had happened because to the loch nothing had. Chapter 2. 600 kilometers to the south, in a flat in Edinburgh's Marchmont district, Callum Fraser was packing a rucksack. He packed the way he did everything, with a methodical, slightly aggressive competence that brooked no suggestion of error and invited no assistance. He had a list. The list was on his phone, and the list was organized by category: clothing, equipment, food, medical, navigation. And each item had a checkbox beside it, and Callum checked the boxes with his thumb as he packed, and the checking was not perfunctory. It was ritual, and the ritual was important, because the ritual was control, and control was the thing that Callum Fraser valued above all other things, above friendship, above love, above the opinions of the people who told him he was arrogant, and the people who told him he was careful, and the people who could not tell the difference. The trip had been his idea. He had found the loch on a geological survey website, an obscure, unlovely body of water in the Western Highlands, listed not as a tourist destination but as a research site, notable for its unusual depth and its anaerobic lower layers. The survey described it in the dry, precise language of geology: a glacially overdeepened basin, a meromictic lake, a persistent chemocline at approximately 40 meters. And Callum had read the description and thought, I want to see that. Not because it was beautiful, because it was extreme. Because it was a body of water that was, in a real and measurable sense, dead. Dead below a certain depth, devoid of oxygen, devoid of life. A layer of black water that had been sitting at the bottom of the loch for centuries without mixing with the layers above. A pocket of ancient, anoxic stillness preserved in the depths like an insect in amber. The scientist in him was fascinated. The man in him, the man who needed to prove again and again that he was the kind of person who went to extreme places and did extreme things and came back to tell the story, was drawn to it the way a lighter is drawn to a fuse. He had invited 5 people, 3 had said yes. Maya Banerjee was his girlfriend. She was 23, a chemistry postgraduate at the University of Edinburgh, and she had been with Callum for 2 years, long enough to know that his confidence was real and his arrogance was a performance, and the difference between the two was impossible to detect from the outside. She was small and dark and precise, with a mind that worked like a scalpel and a patience that worked like a suture, and she had packed for this trip with the same meticulous care she brought to her laboratory work, weighing her pack, counting her calories, labeling her food bags with a Sharpie. She loved Callum. She also feared, in a way she had never articulated to him or to anyone, that his confidence would one day take them somewhere that care could not retrieve them from. Xavier Delacroix was a French exchange student from Lyon, spending a year at Edinburgh's geology department. He was 25, quiet, watchful, built like a distance runner, lean and angular and economical in his movements. He spoke English with a slight accent and perfect grammar, and he had a habit of saying very little for long stretches of time, and then saying exactly the right thing, the thing that everyone else had been circling around without being able to name. He had signed up for the trip because the loch's geology interested him, and because he did not know Callum well enough yet to know that traveling with Callum meant traveling on Callum's terms. Shannon O'Donnell was a nursing student from Galway, 24, loud and warm and constitutionally incapable of despair. She was the kind of person who could find a silver lining in a landslide and a punchline in a funeral, and her optimism was not naive. It was stubborn, willful, a conscious choice that she made every morning the way other people made the choice to get out of bed. She had packed a first aid kit that could have field-treated a bus accident, and a bag of sweets that could have sustained a nursery through an air raid. And she had brought both because she believed, with the fervent, unshakable conviction of a person who has dedicated her life to caring for others, that any situation could be improved by the application of the right materials. Daniel Lee was the youngest at 22, a physics undergraduate from Glasgow. He was tall, gawky, and brilliant in the way that certain young men are brilliant, not with the polished, social brilliance of someone who has learned to perform their intelligence for others, but with the raw, undirected brilliance of a mind that is perpetually running calculations in the background, processing the world as a series of equations and finding, in the solutions, a satisfaction that human interaction could not provide. He had brought a drone. The drone was a DJI Mavic, a compact quadcopter with a 4K camera, and Daniel intended to fly it over the loch to capture aerial footage of the surrounding terrain for a project on glacial geomorphology. The drone was, in Daniel's mind, the most important item on the trip. The rucksack, the boots, the waterproofs, these were necessities. The drone was a purpose. They left Edinburgh at 6 in the morning, in a rented blue Vauxhall that Callum drove with the same aggressive efficiency he brought to everything else. The drive took 5 hours. The road went from motorway to A road to B road to single track, and the single track road wound through a landscape that became, with every passing mile, less populated, less cultivated, less touched by the hand of any species that considered itself dominant. The heather grew thicker. The trees grew sparser. The mountains grew larger and darker and closer, and the sky grew lower, and the rain began, and the rain was not the rain of Edinburgh, polite, intermittent, the rain of a city that has better things to do. The rain was the rain of the Highlands, which is not weather but climate. Not an event but a condition, a permanent, pervasive, penetrating wetness that did not fall from the sky so much as materialize inside it, as if the air itself were saturated beyond capacity, and was simply depositing its excess wherever it could. They arrived at the village at noon. The village was not a village in any meaningful sense. It was a collection of stone buildings, perhaps 20 in total, clustered along a single street that ran parallel to the shore of the loch. There was a pub, a shop that doubled as a post office, a church that looked as if it had not been used for worship in decades but was maintained anyway, out of habit or obligation, or the stubborn Highland refusal to let anything fall down, and a scatter of houses, whitewashed, slate-roofed, each with a garden that was more moss than grass and a view that was more gray than anything else. The loch was visible from the village. It lay beyond the houses, beyond the road, beyond a strip of rocky shore, and it was black. Not dark blue, not deep green, black, the color of ink, of obsidian, of a pupil dilated to its fullest extent. The surface was still, not calm, not placid, but still, with the absolute, motionless stillness of water that is too deep to be stirred by wind, too cold to support the organisms that would disturb its surface, too old to care about the small, temporary disturbances of weather. The mountains were reflected in it with photographic precision, every ridge, every crag, every scree slope mirrored perfectly, and the reflections were not reassuring. They were a reminder that the loch could take anything, a mountain, a sky, a cloud, and hold it in its surface and give nothing back. Callum parked the car in front of the pub. The pub was called the Moray Arms, which was a grand name for a building the size of a large living room, and the sign above the door was peeling, and the windows were fogged, and the whole establishment had the look of a place that had been waiting for customers for so long that it had forgotten how to welcome them, and had settled, instead, into a kind of grumpy, resigned hospitality. the hospitality of a place that would serve you if you insisted but would prefer it if you didn't. They went inside. The pub was warm and dark and smelled of peat smoke and beer. The bar was attended by a man in his 60s, heavy, slow-moving, with a beard the color of rust and eyes the color of the loch outside. His name was Each-uisge, and he was the landlord, and he looked at the four of them, four young, fit, well-equipped city people with their waterproofs and their rucksacks and their evident, blinking disorientation at finding themselves in a place so remote, and his expression was not hostile. It was resigned. It was the expression of a man who has seen this before, young people arriving with their confidence and their equipment and their complete, unbreakable certainty that the world is a manageable place, and who knows how it ends, not because he has seen it end badly, but because he has seen it end, and the ending is always the same. The young people leave, and the loch stays, and nothing changes. "What brings ye to Drumnadrachet?" Each-uisge asked, setting 4 pints on the bar with the unhurried precision of a man who has been pulling pints for 40 years and does not intend to start rushing now. "Hiking," Callum said. "We're doing a trek around the loch, 3 days, maybe 4. The geological survey says there's a shoreline path that goes all the way around." "There is," Each-uisge said. "There is, but I'll tell ye what I tell everyone who comes here." He leaned on the bar, and his eyes, the dark, steady, loch-colored eyes, settled on Callum with a weight that was disproportionate to the man's size. "Didn't he go near the water after dark?" Callum smiled. It was his public smile, the one that was charming and dismissive in equal measure. "Why, what happens after dark?" Each-uisge held his gaze. He did not smile back. "The black water dosni like visitors." "What does that mean?" "It means what it means." Callum waited for more. More did not come. Each-uisge turned away and began wiping the bar with a cloth, and the conversation was over, and the warning had been given, and the warning had been received and filed and dismissed in the way that warnings are always received and filed and dismissed by people who have not yet learned that warnings are not stories but data, and the data is reliable, and the source is credible, and the dismissal is the first step in the sequence of events that leads to the thing the warning was about. They bought supplies. They set up camp. The camp was on the shore. Callum had chosen the site, of course, a flat patch of ground between the road and the water, sheltered by a stand of Scots pines whose trunks were green with moss and whose roots reached toward the loch like fingers reaching for something they could not quite touch. The tents went up. The fire was lit. The evening came on dark early, as it does in the Highlands in October, the light draining from the sky at 4 o'clock as if someone had pulled a plug, and they sat by the fire and ate pasta, and drank whiskey that Each-uisge had sold them at a price that was either generous or extortionate depending on how one defined the value of spirits, in a place where spirits of another kind were the more pressing concern. The loch was 50 meters away. In the dark it was invisible, not a presence but an absence, a hole in the landscape where the land stopped and the nothing began. They could hear it, though. They could hear the water, the tiny, rhythmic lapping of waves that were too small to see but too persistent to ignore, and the sound was not soothing. It was the sound of something breathing, something that was asleep but not deeply, something that could wake at any moment, something that, even in its sleep, was aware of them. Nobody mentioned the warning. The fire crackled. The stars came out, briefly, between clouds, and Daniel flew the drone in a wide circle over the loch, and the drone's camera showed them the water from above, a circle of black in a landscape of gray, perfectly still, perfectly featureless, a hole in the world. And the footage was striking and eerie and exactly what Daniel had wanted, and he landed the drone with the satisfied expression of a man who has captured something on film and believes that the act of capturing has, in some sense, tamed it. They went to bed. The rain started. The rain fell on the tents with the sound of 1,000 small, cold fingers drumming on fabric, and the wind moved through the pines with a sound that was not a howl but a whisper, and the whisper was not words but was close enough to words to be disturbing, because the human brain, confronted with a sound that is almost speech, will fill in the gaps, will assign meaning to the meaningless, We'll hear its name in the wind, and its fears in the water, and its future in the silence between. Callum slept, Maya slept, Xavier and Shannon and Daniel slept. The loch did not sleep. The loch waited. Chapter 3. The horse was there in the morning. It was standing in the reeds at the edge of the loch, not 20 meters from the camp, and it was the most beautiful animal any of them had ever seen. This was not a matter of opinion. It was a fact, as objective and measurable as the temperature or the wind speed, and the fact was this. The horse was beautiful in the way that certain things in nature are beautiful, perfectly, impossibly, unnervingly beautiful, with a beauty that does not delight but disturbs. A beauty that triggers not admiration but alarm, because the beauty is too perfect, too complete, too flawless, and the eye that perceives it sends a signal to the brain that says, "This is wrong, this is not natural, nothing in nature is this perfect, and the perfection is not a gift but a lure." The horse was a stallion. It was charcoal gray, a deep dark gray that was almost black, the color of wet slate, of storm clouds, of the water in the loch, and its coat was smooth and metallic, gleaming in the gray morning light as if it had been polished. Its mane was long and black and dripping, not wet, dripping. The water ran from the mane in a continuous steady stream, dropping from the ends of the hair to the ground, with a sound that was barely audible but that, once heard, could not be unheard. A regular, rhythmic pat-pat-pat, like a leaking tap in a silent house, and the sound was wrong because the horse was standing in the open air, and it was not raining, not here, not at this spot. The rain was falling on the other side of the camp, and there was no source for the water that was pouring from the animal's mane. It was generating the water. It was wet from the inside out. Shannon saw it first. She had crawled out of her tent to use the toilet, a bush behind the pines, a modest, practical arrangement that she had scoped out the night before with the same efficiency she brought to everything, and she had stood up and looked toward the loch, and she had seen the horse, and she had stopped. She had stopped because the horse was looking at her. Its eyes were dark, not brown dark, the color of the loch, the color of the water, the color of something that has no bottom and no shore and no edge, and the eyes were fixed on Shannon with an expression that was not animal. Animals look at humans with curiosity or fear or indifference or hunger. This horse looked at Shannon with recognition. It looked at her the way a person looks at a person they have been waiting for, the way a host looks at a guest who has finally arrived, and the recognition was not comforting. It was terrifying because Shannon had never seen this horse before and the horse had never seen her, and yet the horse's eyes said, "There you are. I've been waiting." "Guys," Shannon said. Her voice was quiet, not a whisper, a quiet voice, the voice of a person who does not want to startle something and is not sure which thing she does not want to startle. "Guys, come look at this." Xavier came out of his tent first. He was an early riser. He always had been, even as a child, his mother had told him, born at dawn and never adjusted, and he pulled on his boots and came to stand beside Shannon, and he saw the horse, and he did not speak. He looked at it the way a geologist looks at an anomaly in a rock formation, with the focused, analytical attention of a mind that is trying to reconcile what it sees with what it knows, and is failing, and is not yet willing to admit that the failure is not a problem with the data, but a problem with the framework. "That's not a wild horse," Xavier said. "No," Shannon said. "There are no wild horses in the Highlands. There are no feral horses in this area. There are no studs, no farms, no stables within 50 kilometers. I know. Where did it come from? I don't know." Daniel emerged next, the drone bag over his shoulder, his hair sticking up in tufts, his eyes still foggy with sleep. He saw the horse and his fog cleared instantly, the way fog clears when a window is opened, a sudden complete dispersal, and he said, "That's an equus cabalus, a stallion, gray. Approximately 16 hands, well fed, well groomed. That is not a wild animal. That is a domesticated horse that has been cared for. Look at the coat, there's not a single burr, not a single tangle. Look at the hooves, they're clean. That animal has been groomed within the last 24 hours. By whom? Shannon asked. Daniel did not answer, because the answer was the problem, and the problem was that there was no answer, and the absence of an answer was the thing that was wrong. Callum and Maya came out together. Callum saw the horse, and his face did what Callum's face always did when confronted with something unexpected. It smiled. Not a smile of pleasure, a smile of engagement, of challenge, of the part of Callum that saw the unknown not as a threat but as an opportunity, as a thing to be investigated and understood and brought to heel. Well, look at that, Callum said. Someone's lost a horse. He started walking toward it. Callum, Maya said, and the word was not a call but a warning, a single word that contained an entire argument. Don't go near it. We don't know where it came from. We don't know who it belongs to. We don't know anything about it. And the man in the pub told us not to go near the water, and the horse is standing in the water. And the water is the thing we were warned about, and you are walking toward it, and I love you, and I am afraid. It's fine, Callum said over his shoulder. It's just a horse. Look at it, it's gorgeous. Probably some farmer's prize stallion got out through a broken gate. We'll catch it, find the owner, be local heroes. He was 15 meters from the horse. 10. The horse stood perfectly still. It did not move. It did not flinch. It did not shy or stamp or toss its head. It stood in the reeds, the water lapping at its fetlocks, its mane dripping its impossible, sourceless water, and it watched Callum approach with those dark, depthless eyes, and the expression in the eyes was not fear or aggression. It was patience. It was the patience of a thing that has been waiting and sees the waiting about to end. And the patience is not exhaustion but anticipation, the anticipation of a trap that is about to be sprung. Callum, Xavier said, and his voice was different now, not the quiet, measured voice of a French geologist but the urgent, sharp voice of a man who has seen something that his brain cannot process but his instincts can. Callum, stop. Why? Look at the water, look at the horse's hooves. Callum was 5 meters from the horse. He looked down. The horse's hooves were in the water, just the edges, just the front of the hooves, the rest on the muddy margin of the shore, and the water around the hooves was not still. It was moving. Not the movement of a current or a wave, but the movement of a thing that is being pulled toward the hooves, drawn upward, as if the horse were a drain, as if the water were being absorbed through the animal's feet, as if the horse and the loch were not two things but one thing, connected, continuous, the horse an extension of the water and the water an extension of the horse. Callum did not stop. Callum saw the water moving and his brain, instead of saying this is wrong, stepped back, said this is interesting, get closer, because Callum was a scientist, and scientists are drawn to anomalies the way moths are drawn to flame, and the drawing is the same, and the outcome is sometimes the same too. He reached out his hand. Chapter 4. The moment Callum's palm touched the horse's flank, the world changed. Not visibly, not audibly. The world did not jump or flash or distort. The mountains did not move. The sky did not darken. The rain did not stop. What changed was something subtler and more fundamental than any of those things, something that operated below the level of the senses, below the level of perception, in the part of the brain that processes not what the body sees or hears but what the body is. Callum felt it first as a warmth, a heat, not the heat of a warm-blooded animal, mammalian heat, the comfortable, predictable 38 degrees C of a horse in October, but a different heat. An electric heat, a heat that started at the point of contact, his palm pressed flat against the smooth, metallic coat, and traveled inward through the skin, through the fascia, through the muscle, into the bone, and the heat was not spreading like warmth spreads diffusely, gradually, following the path of least resistance. The heat was injecting. It was moving along specific paths, nerve paths, tendon paths, the paths that the body uses to send signals from the surface to the core. And it was moving fast, and it was moving with purpose, and the purpose was not comfort. Callum tried to pull his hand away. He could not. The realization came in stages, each stage more horrifying than the last, the way a drowning comes in stages, the surprise, the struggle, the understanding, the despair. First, surprise. His hand would not come away from the horse's side. He pulled, and the hand stayed, and the surprise was the surprise of a door that should open and does not, a mechanism that should respond and does not, a thing that has always worked suddenly not working. Second, struggle. He pulled harder. He planted his feet and leaned back and pulled with the full strength of his arm and shoulder, and the hand stayed, and the not staying was not friction and not grip. The horse was not holding him. There was no hand closing around his wrist, no rope, no clamp, but bond. His skin was bonded to the horse's skin. The boundary between his palm and the horse's flank, the boundary that should have been two surfaces in contact, was no longer a boundary. It was a bridge. It was a fusion. His skin had merged with the horse's skin, the two surfaces flowing into each other like wax melting into wax, and the fusion was seamless and complete and irreversible. And the more he pulled, the more the skin stretched and the more the bond held, and the stretching was not breaking the connection but thickening it, deepening it, making it more secure. Callum, Maya screamed his name. She was running toward him, running across the 20 meters of rocky shore, her boots sliding on the wet stones, her face a mask of terror that was not yet understanding but was already in the deepest part of her, the terror that comes from seeing the person you love in danger that you cannot comprehend and therefore cannot help. "Don't touch the horse," Xavier shouted. "Maya, don't touch it, don't touch him, don't touch the horse." Maya stopped. She was 5 meters from Callum. She could see his hand, or what had been his hand. It was no longer a hand pressed against a horse's side. It was a hand that was becoming part of the horse's side. The skin of his palm had darkened, taking on the gray metallic sheen of the horse's coat, and the border between his fingers and the horse's flank was blurring, the fingerprints dissolving, the whorls and ridges smoothing out, the human skin being absorbed into the equine skin the way a drop of water is absorbed into a sponge. And the absorption was not fast. It was slow, deliberate, methodical, the pace of a thing that is savoring what it is doing. "Help me," Callum said, and his voice was not the voice of a man in control. It was the voice of a man who has just discovered that control was an illusion, that the confidence was a costume, that the lists and the plans and the check boxes were the rituals of a man who believed the world could be managed, and was learning in the worst possible way that the world does not care what he believes. "Help me, I can't get my hand off. It's Maya, it's fusing, I can feel it. I can feel it moving up my arm." He could. The fusion was spreading, from the palm to the wrist, from the wrist to the forearm. The skin of his arm was darkening, the human pallor giving way to the gray, metallic sheen, and the change was not just color, it was texture, it was structure. The skin of his forearm was becoming thicker, denser, tougher, taking on the texture of the horse's hide. And beneath the skin, the muscles were changing too, hardening, tightening, being pulled toward the horse's body, as if the animal were a magnet and Callum's arm were iron. And the pulling was constant and relentless, and it was not going to stop. "Get the knife," Xavier said to Daniel. His voice was flat, calm, the calm of a man who has identified the emergency and is executing the response. And the calm is not natural but manufactured, produced by the force of will, and the will is fueled by fear. "Get the first aid kit. Get the knife. We cut his arm, we cut between his skin and the horse. We break the bond." Daniel ran for the tents. He was back in 30 seconds, the first aid kit open in his hands, the surgical knife, a small, sterile blade meant for cutting bandages and removing splinters, held between his fingers. He knelt beside Callum, beside the horse, and he looked at the junction where Callum's arm met the horse's flank, and his face went gray. "I can't," Daniel said. "There's no gap. There's There's nothing to cut. His skin and the horse's skin are the same thing, they're one thing. I can't cut between them because there is no between. Cut his arm off, Shannon said, and the words came out flat and hard and absolute. The words of a nursing student who has seen trauma and who understands, with clinical precision, that sometimes the only way to save a life is to sacrifice a part. Cut above the bond. Cut through the forearm. We tourniquet it, we stabilize him, we get him to a hospital. I'm a physics student, Daniel said. I'm not a surgeon, I have a 4-inch blade, I can't amputate an arm. Then cut deep, Shannon said. Cut as deep as you can, break the skin, break the connection, try. Daniel looked at Xavier. Xavier looked at Maya. Maya was staring at Callum's arm, at the arm that was no longer entirely an arm, the arm that was becoming an appendage, a limb of the horse, a thing that was being claimed and consumed and incorporated, and her face was not the face of terror anymore. It was the face of something worse. It was the face of a person who is watching something happen that cannot be undone and is beginning, against her will, to understand. Cut, Maya said. Daniel cut. He pressed the blade against Callum's forearm above the bond where the skin was still skin, still human, still pale, and he cut. The blade went in. Callum screamed. Blood welled up, red, human, alive, and for a moment, for one brief electric moment, the bond seemed to loosen. Callum's arm lifted a centimeter from the horse's flank. The skin stretched. The connection thinned. And then it snapped back, not loose tight, tighter than before. The cut in Callum's arm sealed itself, not healed, sealed. The edges of the wound came together and fused, the skin closing over the cut the way the surface of water closes over a stone, and the blood stopped, and the wound was gone, and Callum's arm was more firmly bonded to the horse than it had been before the cut, as if the injury had been not an attack but an offering, not damage but nourishment, and the creature had taken the cut and the blood and used them to strengthen the bond. It healed, Daniel whispered. I cut him and it healed. The horse, it healed him. It closed the wound, The horse moved. It did not startle. It did not bolt or rear or whinny. It simply moved, the way a ship moves when its mooring line is cut, slowly at first, then with gathering momentum, the movement of a thing that has been still for a long time and is deciding with the weight of that stillness to be in motion. It turned. It turned toward the loch. It took one step, and the step was not a horse's step. It was too smooth, too fluid, too silent, the hooves touching the ground without sound, the body moving without the sway and the bounce of a walking horse, moving instead with the gliding, frictionless motion of a thing on water, and Callum went with it. He screamed. He screamed Maya's name, and the scream was not a word but a sound, the sound of a human being who is being taken by something that cannot be reasoned with or fought or persuaded, something that does not negotiate, something that simply takes, and the taking is not violence but physics, the physics of a bond that cannot be broken, the physics of a creature that is larger and stronger and older and more patient than anything a human body can produce. Maya ran. She ran toward the horse, toward Callum, toward the water, and Xavier grabbed her, his arms around her waist, pulling her back, and she fought him, she clawed at his hands. She screamed Callum's name, and Xavier held her, and Daniel stood with the knife in his hand and the blood on the blade and the understanding on his face. The understanding that the knife was useless, that the first aid kit was useless, that all of their equipment and all of their preparation and all of Callum's lists and check boxes were useless against this thing that was not a horse but was wearing a horse the way a person wears a coat, and the coat was beautiful, and the beauty was the trap, and the trap had been sprung. The horse reached the waterline, the hooves touched the surface, and the creature accelerated. Not the acceleration of a galloping horse, the acceleration of a thing that is not running but diving, the acceleration of a missile entering water, and the speed was wrong, too fast, impossible for an animal that was walking a moment ago. And Callum's screams cut short, not because he stopped screaming but because the water took the sound the way the water takes everything, absorbing it, silencing it, making it part of the loch. The surface churned. A circle of white water, 10 meters across, erupted where the horse had gone under, and the churning was violent, far more violent than a horse swimming, violent enough to suggest that something was happening beneath the surface that was not swimming, that was not drowning, that was something else entirely, something that the surface could only hint at and could not reveal. The churning lasted 30 seconds, 40, 50, and then it stopped. The water went flat. The circle of white subsided and the surface was still again, black and mirror-smooth, and the mountains were reflected in it, and the sky was reflected in it, and the rain was reflected in it, and the loch was as if nothing had happened. A minute passed, 2 minutes. The four of them stood on the shore, Maya in Xavier's arms, Shannon with her hands over her mouth, Daniel with the bloody knife at his side, and they stared at the water, and the water stared back, and the staring was not a metaphor. The water was watching them. They could feel it. The surface was still, but the stillness was not emptiness. It was attention, the focused, patient attention of a thing that is assessing what remains. The liver surfaced. It came up slowly, breaking the surface with a gentle, almost apologetic bob, and it floated there. A pale, gray, rubbery organ, smaller than it should have been, orbiting slowly in the small, residual waves of the churning. It was Callum's liver. They knew this not because they recognized it. None of them had ever seen Callum's liver. None of them had ever seen any liver outside of a textbook or a butcher's window, but because the alternative was impossible. The alternative was that this was someone else's liver, that the loch had produced a liver from its inventory of past victims and offered it as a substitute, and that possibility was, in its own way, more horrifying than the truth, because it meant the loch had an inventory, and the inventory was large. Shannon vomited. She turned away from the water and vomited on the stones, and the vomiting was not a reaction to the liver, but a reaction to the understanding that Callum was gone, that the horse had taken him and the water had consumed him, and the liver was all that was left. And the liver was a message, a signature, a mark left by a predator that eats everything but the one organ and leaves the one organ as evidence of the kill. And the evidence was deliberate, and the deliberateness was the worst part, because it meant the creature was not just feeding. It was communicating. Maya did not vomit. Maya did not cry. Maya went still, a stillness that was not calm but shut down, the stillness of a system that has received more input than it can process and has stopped processing, has gone to a white, blank, silent place where nothing comes in and nothing goes out. Xavier held her, and she did not move, and her eyes were open and fixed on the liver, and her face was the face of a person who is not grieving yet, because grief requires understanding, and understanding requires time, and time is the one thing the loch does not give. Chapter 5. The second horse appeared an hour later. They had not moved. They had not eaten, had not packed, had not discussed what to do. They had stood on the shore and watched the liver until the liver sank, slowly, gently, as if the water were swallowing it, as if the loch were reclaiming its signature. And then they had stood and watched the water, and the water had been still, and the stillness had been a wall, and they had not been able to get past it. Then Shannon said, "We need to go, we need to leave, now, right now." And they had begun to move, slowly, clumsily, the movements of people whose bodies are functioning on autopilot while their minds are somewhere else, somewhere underwater, and they had started taking down the tents, and that was when Maya saw the second horse. It was not the same horse. It was not the charcoal gray stallion. It was smaller, thinner, its coat a muddy brown, its ribs visible, its head hanging low. It was standing in the reeds 50 meters up the shore in the same spot where the first horse had been, and it was trembling, its legs shaking, its body shivering, its eyes wide and white-trimmed. And it looked for all the world like a starving, abandoned pony, alone and cold and desperate. "Don't," Xavier said. "Don't any of you look at it, don't go near it." "It's a different horse," Shannon said, and the words were not a suggestion but a plea. the plea of a person who wants to believe that the first horse was an anomaly, a one-time event, a thing that happened once and will not happen again because the alternative that the creature is still here, that it has not left, that it is trying again with a different shape, is too much. It's the same thing, Xavier said. It's the same creature, it's wearing a different coat, don't go near it. Maya was staring at the pony. Her stillness had broken. The shutdown was over, and what had replaced it was not grief but something harder, something sharper, something that looked, from the outside, like the focused, dangerous clarity of a person who has lost something essential and is not yet willing to accept the loss and is looking for a way to reverse it. The pony was small and thin and trembling, and it looked nothing like the gray stallion, and it looked nothing like a threat, and Maya was looking at it, and her face was the face of a woman who is thinking, if I can catch it, if I can hold it, if I can make it tell me where Callum is. Maya, Xavier said. Maya, no. Maya walked toward the pony. She was not running. She was walking, slowly, deliberately, the walk of a person who is approaching a wild animal and does not want to startle it, and her hands were out, palms up, the gesture of harmlessness, and her voice was soft, and she was saying things, quiet things, soothing things, the things you say to a frightened animal, the things that are supposed to calm and reassure. But the things she was really saying, the things beneath the words, were not for the pony. They were for Callum. I'm coming. I'm going to find you. I'm not leaving you. I'm coming. Maya, stop, Daniel shouted. It's the same creature. It changed shape. It's... Maya was 10 meters from the pony. 5. The pony stood in the reeds, trembling, its head low, its eyes wide, and the eyes were not the depthless, dark eyes of the gray stallion. They were brown, warm, animal. The eyes of a frightened pony, and the warmth was a lie, and the lie was perfect, and Maya reached for the pony's neck. And the pony's skin changed. The trembling stopped, the shivering stopped. The ribs disappeared, the body filling out, the coat darkening, the brown becoming gray, the gray becoming the metallic slate-dark sheen of the stallion, and the transformation was not gradual. It was instantaneous, a flicker, a frame change, the way a channel changes on a television, one image replacing another in a single beat. And the pony was gone and the stallion was there, and its eyes were the dark, depthless, hungry eyes, and they were fixed on Maya, and Maya's hand was 3 centimeters from its neck. She pulled back. She pulled back with a speed that was not human. It was the speed of instinct, the speed of a body that knows, before the mind does, that the thing in front of it is death. And she stumbled and she fell not on the stones but on the reeds, and the reeds were not reeds. They were peat. Thick, dark, fibrous peat, the accumulated organic matter of millennia. And the peat was wet and abrasive, and it coated her hand, her arm, her skin, and the peat was cold and gritty, and it pressed against her palm where she had almost touched the creature, and the creature lunged. It lunged not at her body but at the space she had occupied, the space where she had been standing, the space where her hand had been reaching, and the lunge was fast, faster than anything that size should be, and the mouth, the horse's mouth, the mouth that was not a horse's mouth but a thing that opened too wide and showed teeth that were not teeth but were dark. Flat, grinding surfaces, the color of the loch, the texture of stone, closed on the air where her hand had been, and the jaws snapped shut with a sound that was not a snap but a crack, the sound of something hard closing on something empty, and the empty was where Maya had been, and Maya was no longer there. She was on the ground, on the peat, 3 meters away, and her hand, her right hand, the hand that had been reaching for the creature, was coated in peat, in thick, dark, abrasive peat, and the peat was on her skin, and her skin was not bonded. Her skin was free. The peat had done something. The peat had coated her skin, had formed a barrier between her flesh and the creature's adhesive, and the barrier had held, and the adhesive had not bonded, and Maya was free. Run, Xavier screamed. Maya, run, all of you, run, run now. They ran. They ran along the shore, away from the horse, away from the water, toward the road, and behind them the horse did not chase. It stood in the reeds, dripping, watching, and the dripping was faster now, Not pat 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 but splish splish splish. A rapid, agitated dripping, and the horse turned its head and watched them run, and the watching was not frustration. It was not anger. It was calculation. It was the calculation of a predator that has missed a kill and is recalibrating, adjusting its strategy, planning its next approach, because the creature was not done. The creature was never done. The creature had been doing this for 10,000 years, and it had missed before, and it would miss again, and the misses were not failures but data, and the data was being processed, and the next approach would be better. They reached the road. They did not stop running. The road was tarmac, solid, human-made, and the solidness was a comfort that was not rational but was real, and they ran on it, their boots pounding the wet surface, and the loch was to their left, still and black and watching, and the village was ahead, and the pub was ahead, and Doogie was ahead, and Doogie had warned them, and the warning had been true, and the truth of it was a weight that settled on their shoulders with every step. Chapter 6. The pub was a bomb shelter. Not in design. It was a stone building built in 1837, with low ceilings and small windows and a floor that sloped toward the bar, but in function. The four of them burst through the door like people diving into a trench, and the door slammed behind them, and the room enclosed them, and the walls were stone, thick stone, stone that had been quarried from the hillside and fitted together with the stubborn, immovable precision of a people who built things to last, because everything else in their lives was temporary. The weather, the crops, the fish, the light, and the stone was the one thing that endured, and the stone was what they needed now. Stone between them and the water, stone between them and the thing in the water, and the stone was enough for the moment, and the moment was all they could think about. Doogie was behind the bar. He looked up when they came in, and his face did not change, not because he did not see what had happened, but because he had seen it before. The look on their faces, the wild, glassy-eyed, salt-flushed look of people who have been in the presence of something that has broken their understanding of the world, was not new to him. He had seen it on the faces of the two German hikers in 1996. He had seen it on the face of the fisherman's wife in 1981. He had seen it on the face of his own uncle in 1963, when his uncle had come running home from the loch at dusk, white-faced and wordless, and had never spoken about what he had seen, and had never gone near the water again, and had lived for 30 more years with a look in his eyes that was not fear but knowledge, the quiet, permanent knowledge of a man who has looked into something and has seen it looking back. "Sit down," Doogie said. It was not a request. He came around the bar with 4 glasses of whiskey, already poured as if he had been expecting them, as if the sound of the door had been the sound he had been waiting for, and he set the glasses on a table, and he pointed at the table, and they sat and they drank, and the whiskey did what whiskey does in the aftermath of terror. It did not calm them, but it warmed them, and the warming was a substitute for calming, and substitutes in moments of extremity are sufficient. "Tell me," Doogie said. Xavier told him. Xavier was the one who could speak. Maya was silent, Shannon was shaking, Daniel was staring at the wall with the unfocused gaze of a man whose mind is running calculations that do not converge, and Xavier told the story in the flat, precise, unadorned language of a geologist describing a rock formation. The horse, the beauty, the touch, the bond, the drag, the water, the liver. The second horse, the transformation, the peat, the escape. When he finished, Doogie was quiet for a long time. He stood behind the bar, his hands flat on the surface, his eyes on the middle distance, and the quiet was not the quiet of a man thinking about what to say. It was the quiet of a man who has heard a story he already knew and is deciding how much of the rest of the story to tell. "Ye have seen the Each-uisge," he said. "The what?" Shannon asked. "The water horse, the Each-uisge. It's Gaelic. It means water horse, but that's like calling a hurricane some wind. The creature is not a horse. It wears a horse the way a man wears a jacket. It puts on the shape because the shape is the lure, because a horse is beautiful and a horse is trusted, and a horse is the one animal that a human being will walk up to in the wild and touch without fear. And the touching is the trap because the creature's skin isn't skin. It's an adhesive, a biological glue. The moment ye touch it, ye are bonded, and the bond canna be broken, and the creature takes ye into the water, and the water is where it feeds. He paused. He poured himself a whiskey. He drank it in one motion, the practiced, efficient motion of a man who has been drinking whiskey for 40 years and treats it the way other people treat water. The liver, he said. The creature eats everything, everything. Muscle, bone, fat, organs. It breaks the body down and absorbs it, but it leaves the liver, always the liver. The liver floats, and the liver is the marker. It's the creature's signature. It's how ye know. It's how the village has always known. When a liver appears on the shore, someone is gone. How many? Maya asked. Her voice was the first word she had spoken since the road, and the words were flat, toneless, the words of a person who is speaking from a great distance, from the bottom of a well. How many people has it taken? Duji looked at her. His eyes were dark and steady and sad. In my lifetime, 7. In the village's memory, dozens. Since the old days, hundreds. The loch has been here for 10,000 years. The creature has been here as long as the loch. Do the arithmetic. Maya did not do the arithmetic. She did not need to. The number was too large, and the largeness was the point, and the point was that the creature was not an anomaly. It was a condition. It was a condition of the water, the way cold is a condition of the water, the way depth is a condition of the water, and conditions do not end, and conditions do not negotiate, and conditions are not fought or defeated or solved. Conditions are lived with, or conditions are fled from, and the village had chosen to live with it, and the living with involved a simple, non-negotiable rule. Do not go near the water after dark. We went near the water in the morning, Xavier said. Duji said. The creature doesn't have a clock, it has a hunger. The after dark is a guideline, not a rule. The rule is, didn't go near the water at all, but people didn't listen to at all. People listen to after dark because after dark feels like a boundary, and boundaries feel safe, and safe is what people need to feel before they'll go anywhere. So we say after dark and we hope. The Pete, Daniel said, and his voice had changed. The unfocused stare was gone, replaced by the sharp, bright, calculating gaze of a physicist who has found a variable he can work with. Maya fell on Pete, and the Pete stopped the adhesive. The creature couldn't bond through the peat. Why? What's in the peat that breaks the bond? I didn't know the science, Duji said. I know the old words. The old words say the peat is dead, dead for 10,000 years, dead matter, dead water, dead earth. The creature is alive, not alive the way a horse is alive, but alive the way a lake is alive, the way a river is alive, the way a storm is alive. It's alive with the water, and the peat is dead, and the dead repels the alive the way oil repels water. The peat is the opposite of the creature. The peat is what the creature can't cross. Can't cross, Xavier said, or can't touch. Both. The creature can't walk on peat. Its hooves, the hooves it wears, they didn't hold on peat. The peat is too soft, too wet, too dead, and the creature can't bond through peat. The peat gets between the skin and the creature's adhesive, and the bond fails. The peat is a solvent. The peat is a shield. Daniel was nodding. His mind was working. She could see it in his eyes, the rapid, flickering motion of a brain processing variables, running scenarios. So if we coated ourselves in peat, ye'd smell like the bog for a month, Duji said. But the peat would protect ye. The old fishermen used to rub peat on their hands before they went near the water, the ones who remembered. Why don't you tell people? Shannon asked, and her voice was raw, the rawness of a person who is angry and grief-stricken and is channeling the grief into the anger because the anger is the emotion that can move. Why don't you put up signs? Why don't you warn people? Actually warn them, not the cryptic, don't go near the water after dark, but the actual warning. There is a creature in the loch. It looks like a horse. It will kill you. Why don't you tell people that? Duji looked at her, and his expression was not defensive. It was tired. It was the tiredness of a man who has answered this question before in his own mind 1,000 times and has never found a satisfactory answer. Who would believe us? He said. Would you have believed us? Yesterday morning, if I'd said, there's a shape-shifting water horse in the loch that will bond to your skin and drag you to the bottom and eat you and leave your liver floating in the shallows, would you have turned around? Would you have packed your tent and your drone and your hiking boots and driven back to Edinburgh? Shannon did not answer because the answer was no, and they all knew it, and the knowing was a kind of shame. And the shame was the thing that Doogie had been carrying for decades. The shame of a man who knows the truth and knows that the truth, spoken aloud, sounds like madness, and madness, in a world that runs on evidence and data and check boxes, is less credible than silence. There is one other, Doogie said. One other person you should talk to. He lives on the hill above the loch, in a hut of stones. His name is Tam, and he is older than the village, and he has been watching the creature for longer than anyone alive, and he knows more about it than anyone alive, and he is the one ye need to talk to, because he is the only one who can tell ye what happens next. What happens next? Xavier asked. Doogie's eyes went to the window. The window faced the loch. Through the glass, through the rain, through the gray afternoon light, the loch was visible, a flat black expanse, still as a mirror, reflecting nothing. The creature has tasted one of your group, Doogie said. Callum, it has consumed him. It has absorbed his body, his warmth, his nutrients. And in the absorbing it has marked the rest of ye. The creature is a predator, but it isn't a solitary predator. It hunts in sets. Once it has taken one member of a group, it sees the rest of the group as a set, as a collection, a matched set, a thing that is incomplete. A dinner service with a plate missing. The creature will not stop until the set is complete. It will come for ye. Not today, not tonight, but soon. It will change its shape. It will try different lures. It will learn what each of ye responds to, and it will become that thing, and it will come, and the coming will be patient and relentless and perfectly adapted to whatever it is that will make each of ye reach out your hand. The room was silent. The fire crackled. The rain tapped on the window. The loch sat outside, black and still and patient. How do we stop it? Daniel asked. Ye dinna stop it, Doogie said. Ye survive it. Ye get to the other side of the bridge, the stone bridge, the one that crosses the outlet channel, the one on the road to Inverness. The channel is river water, moving water, not loch water. The creature is tethered to the loch. It canna leave the loch, not in its true form. It can walk on the road, aye. The road is stone, and the creature can walk on stone. But it canna cross the river, and the bridge is over the river. And if ye can get to the bridge and get across it and get to your car on the other side, ye can drive, and the driving will take ye out of the creature's range. And the range? I dinna know. Miles, maybe. The creature is tethered to the loch, but the tether isn't a chain. It's a scent. The scent of the water. The creature can go where the scent goes, and the scent goes where the rain goes, and the rain goes everywhere in the Highlands. But the scent fades with distance, and if ye go far enough, fast enough, the creature will lose the trail. And if we don't? Doogie looked at Daniel, and his face was the face of a man who has given the only answer he has and knows it is not enough. Then it will find ye, in whatever shape ye canna resist, and it will take ye, and the water will have another liver, and the set will be one step closer to complete. Chapter 7. They left the pub at 4 o'clock. The light was already failing. The October sun, which never rose very high in this part of the world, was sinking behind the mountains, and the sky was darkening from gray to charcoal to the deep blue-black darkness that comes before night, and the darkness was not a color but a presence, a weight that settled on the landscape and pressed it flat. The loch was a pool of ink. The road was a ribbon of wet tarmac. The village was a cluster of lit windows, warm and small and finite, and beyond the village, in every direction, the Highlands spread out in their vast, empty, rain-soaked indifference, and the indifference was not hostility, it was worse. It was the indifference of a landscape that does not care whether you live or die, because the landscape has been here for millions of years, and will be here for millions more, and the brief, warm, struggling things that crawl across its surface, are too small and too temporary to register. They walked, not toward the bridge, toward the hill, toward Tam, because Duji had said Tam was the one who knew what happened next, and what happened next was the only thing that mattered. The road went up, a steep, winding track that left the village and climbed the hillside above the loch, and the track was not tarmac but dirt and gravel and, increasingly, peat, dark, wet, spongy peat that compressed under their boots and released water and the smell of 10,000 years of decomposition. And the smell was not pleasant, but it was reassuring, because the peat was the shield, the peat was the solvent, the peat was the dead matter that the creature could not cross, and every step they took up the hill was a step deeper into the dead zone, and the dead zone was safety. The hut was visible from 200 meters, a beehive-shaped structure of stacked stones, built in the style of the old Highland shielings, with a turf roof and a low, narrow entrance that required stooping to pass through. Smoke rose from the roof, thin, pale, fragrant, the smoke of peat, not coal, and the smoke was a signal, a sign of habitation, a sign that someone was home and the someone was Tam, and Tam was waiting because Tam was always waiting because waiting was what Tam did. Had been doing for 60 years, sitting in his stone hut on the hill above the loch, watching the water and the creature in the water, and the people who came to the water and did not listen to the warnings and were taken, and the waiting was not patience. It was penance. Tam came out to meet them. He was old, so old that his age had ceased to be a number and had become a condition, a state of being, the way the loch was a condition of the landscape. His face was a topography of wrinkles, each one a channel carved by decades of wind and rain and the slow, patient erosion of time, and his eyes were pale blue, almost white, the color of skimmed milk, the color of ice, and the eyes were not the eyes of an old man. They were the eyes of a watcher. They were eyes that had been looking at one thing for 60 years and had not blinked. "Ye have seen it," he said, not a question. "Callum," Maya said, and the name was the first word she had spoken since the pub, and the word was not a name but a wound, an open, bleeding wound in the form of 2 syllables, and the wound was visible on her face, and Tam saw it, and his pale eyes softened, not with sympathy but with recognition. The recognition of a man who has seen that wound before, on other faces in other years, and who knows that the wound does not heal, that the wound becomes a scar, and the scar becomes a feature, and the feature becomes a face, and the face is the face of a survivor, and being a survivor is not a gift but a sentence. "Come in," Tam said. "Sit, I'll make tea, and I'll tell ye what I can, though what I can tell ye will nie help ye sleep, and sleep is the thing ye'll need most, and it's the thing ye'll get least." They went in. The hut was small, 4 meters across, stone walls, peat floor, a hearth in the center with a fire of cut peat that burned with a slow, orange, sweet-smelling flame. There were no chairs. They sat on wool blankets spread over the peat floor, and the floor was warm, the warmth of the earth, rising through the decomposing matter, the warmth of 10,000 years of slow, bacterial fire, the warmth that never goes out because the peat is always burning, always composting, always converting dead matter into heat, and the heat was the dead's gift to the living, and the living sat in it and were warmed by it, and did not think about what the warmth was made of, because thinking about it would have been too much. Tam made tea. He boiled water in a blackened pot that hung over the fire on an iron chain, and he made the tea strong, strong enough to stand a spoon in, the tea of a man who has been making tea the same way for 60 years and who treats change the way the loch treats visitors. He gave it to them in cups that were stained and chipped and warm, and they drank, and the tea did what tea does. It anchored them. It gave their hands something to hold and their mouth something to taste and their stomach something to warm. And the anchoring was physical, bodily, the opposite of the floating, unanchored, unmoored feeling that had been with them since the shore. And the tea was, in its small, domestic way, a lifeline. Tell me what the landlord told ye, Tam said, and they told him. Everything from the beginning, the horse and the touch and the bond and the water and the liver, the second horse and the transformation and the peat and the escape, Duji's explanation of the Each-uisge, the rule of the liver, the creatures hunting in sets. Tam listened. His pale eyes did not move. His face did not change. He sat by the fire, his staff across his knees, and he listened with the absolute focused stillness of a man who has been listening to the same story for 60 years, and who hears, in each new telling, not the differences but the pattern that never changes, the pattern of beauty and touch and bond and water and liver, the pattern that is the creature's signature, the pattern that is as old as the loch. Everything Duji told ye is true, Tam said when they had finished. But he didn't tell ye the worst part. The worst part isn't the killing. The killing is the creature's nature. It kills the way a spider kills, the way a pitcher plant kills, because killing is how it feeds, and feeding is how it survives, and survival is the only thing the creature knows. The worst part is the knowing. The creature knows ye. Now, it has tasted Callum, has absorbed his body, his blood, his cells, his DNA, and in the absorbing it has learned him, his memories, his feelings, his weaknesses. It knows who he loved, what he feared, what he desired, what he couldn't resist, and it will use that knowledge. Not today, not tonight, but the creature is patient. The creature has been patient for 10,000 years. It will wait until ye are tired, until ye are weak, until ye are alone, and then it will come to ye wearing the shape that ye canna resist, and it will speak with the voice of the person ye loved, and it will say the thing that ye canna ignore, and the saying will be the lure, and the lure will be perfect because the creature knows ye now. It has Callum inside it, and Callum is the map, and the map leads to ye. Maya was looking at Tam, and her face was the face of a person who is hearing the worst thing they have ever heard and who knows, with a terrible, sinking certainty, that the worst thing is true. It has his memories. Lie. It knows about us, about me, about all of us. Lie. It can become him. Tam looked at her and his pale eyes were very, very sad. It can become anything, lass. Anything that will make ye come to it, a horse, a calf, a lost dog, a child crying on the shore. And if ye knew the person it took, if ye loved the person it took, it can become that person. Not perfectly, not exactly, but close enough. Close enough to make ye hesitate, close enough to make ye reach out your hand. And the reaching is all it needs. The reaching is the trigger. The moment ye touch the shape becomes the creature, and the creature becomes the adhesive, and the adhesive becomes the bond, and the bond is the end. The fire crackled. The peat smoke rose. The rain fell on the turf roof with the sound of 1,000 small, cold fingers. How do we fight it? Daniel asked. You didn't fight it, Tam said. I've been on this hill for 60 years, watching it, studying it, learning its habits. I've seen it take 7 people in my lifetime. I've seen it change shape a dozen times, horse, calf, pony, foal, and once in 1981, a woman. A woman standing in the shallows, her dress wet, her face turned away, and the fisherman who went to help her. He stopped, he shook his head. Ye didn't fight it, ye avoid it. Ye stay on the peat. Ye stay away from the water. Ye get to the bridge and ye get across it and ye get to the other side of the river, and then ye drive, and ye didn't stop driving until the scent of the water is gone from the air, and the sound of the dripping is gone from your ears, and the memory of the loch is fading like a dream fades in the morning. Not gone, never gone, but fading, fading, always fading, until it is small enough to carry. And if we can't get to the bridge, Xavier asked. Then ye stay here, on the hill, on the peat. The creature canna come here. The peat is the boundary. I've lived on this hill for 60 years and it has never come here, not once, because it canna. The peat is dead and the creature is alive with the water, and the dead and the alive dinny mix. But ye canna stay here forever. The hill is small. The peat is shallow, and the creature is patient. It will wait for ye at the bottom of the hill, on the road, on the shore, in the water, and it will wait as long as it takes. The bridge is 800 meters from the village, Xavier said. Across the road, along the shore. Lie. The creature will be on the road. Lie. How do we get past it? Tam looked at the fire. He was quiet for a moment, and the quiet was the quiet of a man who is deciding whether to share a piece of knowledge that is dangerous, not because the knowledge is wrong, but because the knowledge is a weapon, and weapons cut both ways. The creature is blinded by the scent of the water, Tam said. It sees the world through the water, through the smell of the water, through the taste of the water, through the feel of the water. The water is its eyes, its ears, its skin. When the creature leaves the water, when it walks on the road, on the stone, it is navigating by scent alone, and the scent is the scent of the loch, and the scent is strong, and the strength of the scent is the creature's advantage and its weakness. Because if ye can overwhelm the scent, if ye can fill the air with a smell that is stronger than the water, ye can blind it. Not for long, a minute, maybe two, but a minute is enough. A minute is enough to run 800 meters if ye run, and a minute is enough to cross a bridge if the bridge is close. What smell? Daniel asked. What's stronger than the loch? Fire, Tam said. Heat, smoke, the smell of burning. The creature is water, and water fears fire, and the fear isn't metaphor, it's chemistry. The creature's adhesive, the glue on its skin, breaks down at high temperatures. Heat denatures the proteins in the adhesive. The bond fails. The creature canna bond through heat, and the creature canna see through smoke, and if ye build a wall of fire between ye and the loch, the creature willna cross it. It canna. The fire is the one thing it fears more than the peat, because the peat is passive. The peat is a wall, a boundary, a thing that stops the creature by being there, but the fire is active. The fire reaches out. The fire burns. The fire is the one thing in this landscape that is more alive than the creature, and the creature, for all its power, for all its age, for all its hunger, is afraid of it. Daniel looked at Xavier. Xavier looked at Shannon. Shannon looked at Maya. Maya looked at the fire, the peat fire, the small, orange, sweet-smelling fire that burned in the hearth of Tam's stone hut, and her face was the face of a person who is forming a plan, not because the plan will work, but because the plan is the only alternative to despair, and despair is a luxury they cannot afford. We have petrol, Daniel said. In the car, a full canister. I brought it for the camp stove. And I have a flare gun, Xavier said. In my pack for emergencies. Then ye have what ye need, Tam said. The petrol is the fuel. The flare is the spark. The road between the village and the bridge is the ground. Pour the petrol along the shore side of the road, not on the road, on the shore between the road and the loch, and light it with the flare, and the fire will rise, and the fire will be a wall, and the wall will be between ye and the creature willna cross it, and ye run. Ye run for the bridge, and ye cross it, and ye dinna look back, and ye dinna stop, and the car is on the other side, and the keys are in someone's pocket, and the road after the bridge is the road to Inverness, and Inverness is 20 miles, and 20 miles is far enough. What about you? Shannon asked. Tam smiled. It was the first time he had smiled, and the smile was not a smile of amusement or warmth. It was the smile of a man who has been alone for 60 years, and who has made peace with the aloneness, and who is not afraid of what comes next, because what comes next is what has been coming for 60 years, and the waiting is almost over. I'll stay, he said. I'll watch, I always watch. Chapter 8. They left the hut at dawn. The dawn was not a dawn in any meaningful sense. The sky did not lighten, the sun did not appear, the world did not shift from dark to light. The dawn in this part of the Highlands in October was a change from black to gray, from the black of night to the gray of a day that would never be bright. And the gray was the color of the sky and the water and the stone and the heather and the faces of the 4 people who stood on the hillside in the cold, wet, featureless morning and looked down at the road below, and the loch beyond it and the bridge in the distance. And the looking was not planning. The looking was reckoning. The looking was the act of measuring the distance between where they were and where they needed to be, and the distance was 800 meters of road, and the road ran along the shore, and the shore was the creature's territory, and the territory was the killing ground. They had prepared. Tam had given them what he could, a bag of dried peat cut into rough bricks and instructions to rub the peat on their hands, their arms, any exposed skin, the way the old fishermen used to do. The peat was the shield. The peat was the solvent. The peat was the dead matter that the creature's adhesive could not bond through, and they had rubbed it on their skin, thick, dark, gritty, stinking of decomposition. And the peat coated their hands and their forearms and their necks, and the coating was not elegant and not comfortable and not clean, but it was protection, and protection was the only currency that mattered. Daniel carried the petrol canister, a 5-liter container, heavy, sloshing with liquid that smelled of volatile hydrocarbons, and the smell was aggressive, chemical, the opposite of the loch's mineral tang. Xavier carried the flare gun, a single-shot device, orange plastic with 1 cartridge. Shannon carried the first aid kit, repacked, restocked, the knife inside but the knife useless, and they all knew it. Maya carried nothing. Maya carried herself, and the carrying was enough, because the weight of grief is heavier than any pack, and Maya was carrying Callum. They descended the hill. The peat under their feet was soft and wet and dead, and the deadness was the shield, and the shield held. They could feel it, a subtle, indefinable resistance in the air, as if the peat were pushing back against something, pushing back against the creature's scent, the creature's reach, the creature's awareness, and the pushing back was the reason Tam had survived 60 years on this hill, and the pushing back was the reason they were still alive, and the pushing back would end when the peat ended, and the peat ended at the road, and the road was where the creature lived. They reached the road. The tarmac was wet and dark and solid, and the solidness was the last human thing between them and the bridge was 600 meters away, and the loch was to their left, 20 meters beyond the road, black and still and watching. They started running. Chapter 9. They ran. The road was 600 meters of wet tarmac, and the tarmac was flat and straight and should have been easy, and it was not easy, because running is not just a matter of legs and lungs and the mechanical conversion of oxygen into motion. Running is a matter of the mind, and the mind was not cooperating. The mind was elsewhere. The mind was on the shore, on the water, on the dark surface of the loch that lay 20 meters to their left, still and black and watchful, and the watchfulness was not imagined. They could feel it, the attention of the water, the focused, patient, predatory attention of a thing that was tracking them the way a hawk tracks a rabbit, not by sight but by scent, by the subtle, invisible, unmistakable signature of their bodies moving through air. And the scent was leaving them and entering the air and drifting toward the water, and the water was receiving it, and the water was processing it, and the water knew where they were. Xavier was in front. He was the fastest. He had always been the fastest, the lean, angular distance runner's body that moved with the economy of a machine, each stride precisely calibrated, each breath precisely timed, and the precision was not effort but nature. The way some people are tall and some people are short, and some people are built for running and some people are built for thinking, and Xavier was built for both. He held the flare gun in his right hand, the orange plastic slick with rain and peat, and his eyes were on the road ahead, on the bridge, on the stone structure that was visible now. A narrow, single-lane bridge of gray granite, its low walls chest-high, its surface cobblestone, spanning the channel where the loch drained into the river below, and the channel was narrow, 30 feet, Doogie had said, and the water in it was fast, dark, churning, moving water, river water, not loch water, and the moving water was the boundary, and the boundary was the threshold, and the threshold was safety. Shannon was behind him. She was not a runner, she was a walker, a stroller, a person who moved through the world at the pace of a person who enjoys the journey and is not in a hurry to reach the destination. But fear had made her a runner, and the fear was not the fear of the creature, not exactly. The fear was the fear of being left behind, the fear of being the slow one, the fear of being the person at the back of the group when the thing that is chasing catches up, and the fear powered her legs and her lungs and her heart with a ferocity that training never could. And she ran faster than she had ever run in her life, and the running was not graceful, but it was fast, and fast was what mattered. Maya was next. She ran the way she did everything, with a controlled, deliberate internal force that looked, from the outside, like calm and was, from the inside, like a woman holding herself together with her bare hands. Her grief was a weight, a physical, measurable weight, as real as a rucksack, as real as a stone in her pocket, and the weight dragged at her, pulled at her stride, shortened her breath, and she ran through it the way a person runs through water, each step an effort, each breath a decision, and the decision was always the same. Keep going, keep going, keep going, do not stop, do not look back, keep going. Daniel was last. He was the tallest and the youngest and the most physically awkward, a body that had grown too fast and had never fully learned to inhabit itself, all elbows and knees, and the loping, inefficient stride of a person whose muscles and bones were in a state of permanent negotiation. He carried the petrol canister in his left hand, and the canister was heavy, 5 liters of liquid, sloshing with each stride, throwing off his balance. And he held the flare gun in his right hand, and the flare gun was Xavier's, and Xavier had given it to him because Daniel was last and Daniel was the one who would need it. And the needing was not a prediction but a plan, and the plan was, if the creature comes, Daniel fires the flare, and the flare is the spark, and the petrol is the fuel, and the fire is the wall, and the wall is the thing that stands between them and the water. 200 meters. The road was flat and straight, and the bridge was ahead, and the loch was to their left, and the shore was to their left, and the water was to their left, and everything to their left was the creature's territory, and they were running along the edge of it, running along the boundary between the road and the water. And the boundary was 20 meters of rocky shore, and the 20 meters was not enough, and they knew it was not enough, because the creature had crossed the boundary before, had walked on the road, on the stone, had stood on the tarmac and watched them climb the hill, and the creature could cross the boundary again. 400 meters. The bridge was close, 200 meters ahead, and the cobblestones were visible, and the low walls were visible, and the channel below was visible. The dark, churning water of the outlet, moving fast, river water, safe water, and the sight of it was the most beautiful thing Xavier had ever seen. And the beauty was not aesthetic but functional, the beauty of a door in a wall, of a light in a tunnel, of a shore after a shipwreck, and Xavier ran toward it with everything he had. 500 meters, and Shannon screamed. Chapter 10. Xavier stopped. He turned. Shannon was standing in the middle of the road, 15 meters behind him, and she was not running. She was staring at the shore, and her face was the face of a person who is seeing something that cannot be real and is real, and the realness of it is the thing that breaks the mind. Not the impossibility but the possibility, the terrible, ordinary, this is actually happening possibility that the world contains this thing, and the thing is here and the thing is coming. It was not a horse. It was a calf, a small, brown, trembling calf standing in the shallows at the edge of the loch, its legs thin and shaking, its body wet and shivering, its eyes, large, dark, liquid, fixed on Shannon. It was the image of a lost, cold, frightened baby animal, and it was standing in the water, and the water was rising around its legs, and the calf was looking at Shannon with an expression that was not animal. It was pleading. It was the pleading of a thing that knows exactly what Shannon is, a nursing student, a carer, a person whose deepest instinct is to help the helpless, and has calibrated its appearance to match that knowledge, and the calibration was perfect because Shannon's feet had stopped, and Shannon's body had turned, and Shannon's hands were reaching. Shannon, Xavier was running back toward her, back toward the creature, back toward the water. Shannon, no, that's not a calf, that's the creature, it's wearing. "I know," Shannon said, and her voice was strange, thin, distant, the voice of a person who is standing at the edge of something and is looking down and is not sure whether the fall will kill her. "I know what it is. I know. But it looks so real, Xavier. It looks so cold. It's shivering. It's—" "Look at its legs," Daniel said, and he was there, beside her, the petrol canister set down, the flare gun raised, his voice calm with the manufactured calm of a man who is terrified, and is converting the terror into stillness the way an engine converts fuel into motion. "Shannon, look at the legs. Look at the water." She looked. The calf's legs were in the water, and the water was not moving around them, not lapping, not flowing, not behaving the way water behaves around a solid object. The water was merging with the legs. The boundary between the legs and the water was not a boundary. It was a gradient, a spectrum, a slow transition from solid to liquid, and the transition was continuous, and the continuity meant that the calf was not standing in the water. The calf was the water. The calf was the loch wearing the shape of a calf, and the shape was a costume, and the costume was a lure. And the lure was designed for Shannon, calibrated for Shannon, built from the creature's knowledge of what Shannon could not resist, and the knowledge had come from Callum, Callum's absorbed memories. Callum's knowledge of his friends, Callum's understanding of who Shannon was and what Shannon would do when confronted with a shivering, freezing, helpless baby animal. And the knowledge was being used against them, and the using was the creature's strategy, and the strategy was working. "Shannon," Maya said, and her voice was different, not the flat, distant voice of grief but a new voice, a voice that was sharp and urgent and alive, the voice of a person who has found in the extremity of the moment a clarity that grief had buried and terror had uncovered. "Shannon, it's using him. It's using Callum. It ate him, and it knows what he knew, and it knows that you can't walk away from something that's suffering. That's who you are. That's your strength. And it's using your strength as a trap. Don't let it. Don't let it use him like that. Don't let it turn Callum into bait." Shannon looked at Maya. Their eyes met. And in the meeting something passed, not a word, not a thought, but a recognition. The recognition of two people who are looking at the same thing and seeing it the same way, and the seeing was the thing that broke the spell. Shannon's feet moved. She turned away from the calf, and the turning was the hardest thing she had ever done. Harder than any exam, harder than any shift, harder than any moment in her training when she had held a dying patient's hand and watched the monitor flatline. Because the turning was a betrayal of everything she was, and she did it anyway, and the doing was not courage. The doing was survival, and survival is not always noble, and sometimes survival is just running, and the running is the only option, and the option is taken not because it is right but because it is the only thing left. The calf dissolved. Behind them as they ran, the shape lost coherence, the legs melting into the water, the body losing form, the eyes the last thing to go, the dark, liquid, hungry eyes that watched them run and then were gone, and the water was water again, and the shore was empty, and the dripping. Where was the dripping? The dripping was behind them, close behind them, and Xavier looked back and saw the horse. It was on the road. The gray stallion was on the road, on the tarmac, 50 meters behind them, and it was walking. Not running, walking, with the slow, deliberate, patient pace of a thing that does not need to rush because it knows where they are going and knows that the road is narrow, and the bridge is a bottleneck, and the bottleneck is a trap, and the trap does not require speed. It requires patience. And the creature had been patient for 10,000 years, and the patience was a weapon, and the weapon was more dangerous than speed. "Daniel," Xavier shouted, "now the petrol, now." Daniel stopped. He set the canister down. He unscrewed the cap. He upended the canister. Not on the road, on the shore, on the strip of rocky ground between the tarmac and the water. And the petrol poured out in a dark, heavy, chemical-smelling stream, pooling on the stones, running down toward the water, and the smell was aggressive and strong, and it filled the air with a volatility that was the opposite of the loch's mineral patience. And the petrol spread across the shore in a wide, irregular arc. and Daniel dropped the empty canister and raised the flare gun. The horse stopped. It was 30 meters away on the road, and it had stopped, and the stopping was not hesitation. It was attention. The creature was looking at the petrol, at the dark, spreading pool, at the flare gun in Daniel's hand, and the looking was not fear. Not yet. It was assessment. The creature was assessing the threat, and the assessment was rapid and precise. The assessment of a predator that has been alive for 10,000 years and has encountered fire before and knows what fire does and does not fear it yet, but respects it, the way a general respects an enemy's position, not with fear but with calculation. Daniel fired the flare. The flare erupted from the gun with a sound that was not a bang but a whoosh, the sound of compressed gas escaping, of a chemical reaction igniting, of a small, bright, burning star being launched into the air. And the flare arced upward, trailing smoke and light, and it came down, not on the road, not on the water, but on the shore, on the petrol, and the petrol caught. The fire was instant, not a gradual build, not a slow spread, a wall. A wall of orange and yellow and red flame that rose from the shore in a single, explosive, breath-stealing eruption, and the wall was 3 meters high and 20 meters long, and it ran along the edge of the road like a burning fence, and the heat was enormous, a physical force, a blast of hot air and radiant energy that hit Daniel in the face and made him stagger backward. And the smell was petrol and peat and something else, something organic, something that smelled like burning hair, and the something else was the creature's adhesive, the thin film of biological glue that the creature left on the ground wherever it walked, and the adhesive was burning, and the burning was producing a smell that was acrid and sweet and terrible, and the smell was the smell of the creature's fear. The horse recoiled. It backed away from the fire 2 steps, 3 steps, its hooves scraping on the tarmac, and the recoiling was not the smooth, fluid, frictionless motion of the creature on the water. It was clumsy. It was awkward. It was the motion of a thing that is out of its element, that is on dry land, that is away from the water and the water's power and the water's protection. And the fire was between it and the water, and the separation was the creature's weakness, and the weakness was visible, and the visibility was hope. "Run!" Xavier screamed, and they ran. 200 meters. 100. The bridge was ahead. The stone bridge, the cobblestones, the low walls, the channel below with its churning, moving, river water, and the bridge was the threshold, the boundary, the line between the creature's world and theirs, and the bridge was 50 meters away, and 40 and 30, and the fire behind them was roaring, and the petrol was burning, and the wall of flame was holding, and the creature was behind the wall, and the wall was between them, and the wall was enough. 20 meters. 10. Xavier's feet hit the cobblestones, and the cobblestones were solid, real stone beneath his boots, and he ran across the bridge, the channel below churning with dark water, the walls chest-high, the sky above gray and vast and open, and he was across. Shannon was across. Maya was across. Daniel was not. Chapter 11. Xavier turned. Daniel was on the bridge 10 meters from the far side, his feet on the cobblestones, the spent flare gun still in his hand, and he was not running. He was standing still, and he was looking back toward the fire, back toward the loch, and Xavier looked, and he saw what Daniel was seeing. The fire was dying. The petrol was burning out 3 minutes, maybe 4, the volatile hydrocarbons evaporating, the flames shrinking, the wall of fire lowering, and the lowering was not gradual but accelerating, the last of the fuel being consumed, the wall becoming a fence, the fence becoming a line, the line becoming a trail, and the trail was dying, and behind the dying fire the horse was waiting. It was standing on the road, on the tarmac, behind the remnant of the fire. It had not moved, had not advanced, had not retreated, had simply stood and waited for the fire to die, and the waiting was the patience, and the patience was the creature's greatest weapon, and the patience was about to be rewarded because the fire was dying and the wall was falling, and the gap between the creature and the road was opening, and the opening was an invitation, and the invitation was, "Come through. Come through, the wall is gone, The way is clear. Come through and take what is mine." But Daniel was not looking at the fire. Daniel was looking at the shore. There was something on the shore, something that had not been there before, a shape, a figure standing at the water's edge where the fire had been, in the smoke, in the fading heat, and the shape was not a horse. The shape was not a calf. The shape was a person. It was Callum. He was standing at the water's edge, his back to the loch, his face toward the bridge, and he was wearing the clothes he had been wearing when he was taken. The hiking boots, the waterproof jacket, the dark trousers, and his face was Callum's face, and his body was Callum's body, and the appearance was perfect. The hair, the posture, the permanent squint, the set of the jaw, and the perfection was the lie. And the lie was the creature's masterpiece, the ultimate lure, the shape that was designed not for a stranger but for the people who had loved Callum, who had watched him die, who would do anything, anything, to believe that he was alive, that the water had not consumed him, that the liver had been a trick and the death had been a mistake, and Callum was here, standing on the shore, alive, waiting to be rescued. "Callum," Maya said, and the word was not a word. It was a wound. It was the sound of a heart breaking open, and the breaking was not figurative. It was physical, a tearing, ripping, catastrophic failure of the containment that Maya had built around her grief. And the containment had been holding since the shore, had been holding through the pub and the hut and the hill and the road. And the word Callum shattered it, and the shattering was visible on her face, and Xavier grabbed her. "Don't look at it," Xavier said, and his voice was hard, not cruel, not unkind, but hard. The hardness of a man who is holding someone he cares about at the edge of a cliff and cannot afford to be gentle because gentle is not strong enough. "Maya, it's not him. It's the creature. It's wearing his face. It's using his face to make you stop, to make you go back, to make you reach out your hand." "But what if it's him?" Maya whispered, and the whisper was the whisper of a person who knows the answer and is asking anyway, because the asking is the last, desperate, irrational act of hope. And hope does not die easily, and hope does not die rationally, and hope does not die until it is killed, and the killing is the hardest thing a person can do. What if he's alive? What if it didn't kill him, it killed him, Xavier said. "You saw the liver, you saw it. The liver was real. Callum is dead, Maya. The thing on the shore is not Callum. It's the creature wearing Callum's body like a coat, and the coat is made of the same adhesive that took him, and the moment you touch it, you're bonded, and the bonding is the end. Do you understand? Do you understand?" Maya looked at the shape on the shore, the shape that looked like Callum, the shape that was smiling, Callum's smile, the charming, confident, slightly condescending smile that she had loved and that had driven her crazy and that she would never see again. Never, because Callum was dead, and the thing on the shore was not Callum, and the not Callum was smiling, and the smile was the lure, and the lure was perfect. "Daniel," Maya said, and her voice was no longer a whisper. It was the voice of a person who has killed hope and is standing in the aftermath and is looking at the next thing, and the next thing is survival. "Daniel, run. Run now. Don't look at it. Run." Daniel ran. He turned from the shape on the shore, the Callum shape, the thing that was not Callum, and he ran, and his long, awkward legs pounded the cobblestones, and he was 10 meters from the far side and 5, and the shape on the shore moved. It did not walk. It did not run. It flowed. The Callum shape lost its coherence, the way the calf had lost its coherence, the way the pony had lost its coherence, and the body dissolved, the legs melting, the arms dissolving, the face collapsing inward like a mask being sucked into a vacuum, and the shape was gone, and the stallion was there, the gray stallion, and it was on the bridge. It was on the bridge. The creature was on the bridge. The stone bridge. The bridge that was supposed to be the boundary, the threshold, the line between the creature's world and theirs. The creature was on the bridge, its hooves on the cobblestones, its mane dripping, and the dripping was rapid now. Splish, 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 splish. A frantic, urgent, accelerating rhythm, and the horse was between Daniel and the far side, between Daniel and the car, between Daniel and safety, and Daniel was trapped. The fire was dead. The petrol was gone. The flare was spent. Daniel had nothing. the empty canister, the spent flare gun, and the peat on his skin, and the peat was a shield but not a weapon, and the creature was between him and everything. "Daniel," Shannon screamed from the far side. "The peat! Rub the peat on the cobblestones under its hooves." Daniel understood. Not fully. Not with the clear, analytical understanding of a physics student processing a problem, but with the desperate, instinctive understanding of a person who is going to die in the next 10 seconds unless they do something. And the something is the only thing available, and the only thing available is the peat. He dropped to his knees. The bridge was cobblestone, old, rough, the gaps between the stones filled with moss and dirt, and Daniel clawed at the gaps, digging into the moss and the dirt, and beneath the moss was peat. Not the deep peat of the hillside, not the ancient, compacted, 10,000-year-old peat that Tam had lived on, but peat nonetheless, trace peat, the peat that had been used as mortar when the bridge was built. The peat that had been packed between the stones 200 years ago and had survived in the gaps, dead and dry and compressed, and Daniel dug it out with his fingers, and he threw it, not at the horse, but at the ground, at the cobblestones between himself and the creature, and the peat scattered on the stone, and the horse's hooves. The horse's hooves slipped. The creature stumbled. It was a small stumble, a hitch in the stride, a momentary loss of traction, the equine equivalent of a person stepping on ice, but it was enough. It was enough because Daniel was already running, already moving, already throwing himself past the horse on the left side, on the wall side, and his shoulder hit the low stone wall and his hand grabbed the edge and he vaulted. Not cleanly, not gracefully, but desperately, the graceless vault of a man who is throwing his body over an obstacle because the alternative is death, and he went over the wall. He went over the wall and into the channel. The water was cold. The cold was not a temperature, it was a weapon, a physical assault, a full-body blow that drove the air from his lungs and the heat from his muscles and the thought from his mind. And the current was fast, the outlet of a deep loch, the overflow of 10,000 years of accumulated rainfall, moving with the force of a river in spate, and the current took him. It took him downstream, away from the loch, away from the bridge, away from the creature. The river water was moving water, safe water, and the moving was the safety, and Daniel was in the safety, and the safety was carrying him, and the carrying was fast, and the rocks were sharp, and the cold was killing him, but the killing was slow, and the creature's killing would have been fast, and slow was better than fast, and the river carried him, and he did not look back. On the bridge the horse stood. It stood on the cobblestones, its hooves on the stone, and it did not follow Daniel into the water, because the water on the bridge side was the channel, and the channel was river water, and the river water was not the loch, and the creature could not enter the river. The creature was tethered to the loch, the scent of the loch, the chemistry of the loch, the deep, black, anaerobic soul of the loch, and the river was different, and the difference was the boundary, and the boundary held. The horse turned. It turned on the bridge and it looked at the three people on the far side, Xavier, Shannon, Maya, and the looking was not anger. The looking was not frustration. The looking was the same expression it had worn on the hillside, the same expression it had worn on the shore, patience, calculation. The calm, measured, analytical patience of a predator that has been denied a kill, and is assessing what remains and is deciding what to do next, and the decision is always the same. Wait. Wait and watch and learn and adapt and come again, in a different shape, with a different lure, and the coming will be patient and the patience will be perfect and the perfection will be the trap. It walked off the bridge. It walked back toward the loch, its hooves on the tarmac, its mane dripping, and the dripping slowed as it moved away from the bridge, away from the river, back toward the loch, and as the dripping slowed, the horse's gait changed. The clumsy, stumbling gait of the creature on the bridge giving way to the smooth, fluid, frictionless glide of the creature on its home ground, and the glide was the creature's true movement, the movement of a thing that is not walking on the ground but flowing over it, the way water flows over stone, and the flowing was beautiful, and the beauty was the trap, and the trap was the creature's nature, and the nature was the loch. Chapter 12. Daniel washed up 200 meters downstream. He was alive, cut, bruised, hypothermic, his left ankle twisted, his hands torn from clawing at the cobblestones, but alive. Xavier and Shannon and Maya found him on the riverbank, lying in the mud, shivering, his teeth chattering with the staccato rhythm of a body that is trying to generate heat and failing. And Shannon wrapped him in a space blanket from the first aid kit and poured hot chocolate from a thermos she had packed. Packed because Shannon was the person who packed for emergencies, who anticipated needs before they arose, who carried warmth in a bag because warmth was the thing she offered the world. And the hot chocolate was cold by the time it reached his lips, but it was liquid, and it was sweet, and it was alive, and alive was enough. They got him to the car. The car was in the levee on the far side of the bridge, the blue Vauxhall, untouched, unharmed, as mundane and as beautiful as a thing can be when the alternative is a creature from a black Water Loch. And Daniel sat in the back seat with Shannon beside him, and Maya sat in the front, and Xavier drove, and the car started. And the starting was the most normal thing that had happened in 24 hours, and the normalcy was a shock, a jarring, disorienting return to a world where things worked and machines responded, and the turning of a key produced a predictable outcome, and the predictability was the opposite of everything they had experienced, and the opposite was a relief so profound that it felt like grief. They drove. The road went away from the loch, away from the water, away from the village, away from Tam's Hill and Doogie's pub and the shore where Callum had died, and the road climbed, and the climbing took them higher, and the higher they went, the smaller the loch became, and the smaller it became, the more it looked like what it was, a body of water. A geological feature, a glacially over-deepened basin with a persistent chemocline at approximately 40 meters, and the description was dry and precise and scientific, and the dryness was a comfort, and the comfort was distance, and the distance was growing, and the growing was the thing that would save them. But distance is not safety. Distance is just space, and space is just time, and time is the thing the creature has in abundance. Maya looked in the wing mirror. The loch was visible behind them, a dark shape in a gray landscape, shrinking with every kilometer but still there, still visible, still present. And on the shore a speck, a dot, a tiny dark figure standing at the water's edge, the horse, the gray stallion. It was standing where it always stood in the reeds at the water's edge, and it was watching them go, not chasing, not following, watching. The patient, calculated, unhurried watching of a thing that does not need to chase because it knows the road goes somewhere and the somewhere has a return, and the return is inevitable. Because travelers always return, or if they don't, others come, and the others are the same, young, confident, equipped, dismissive of warnings, and the creature will be there, in whatever shape the next traveler cannot resist, and the beauty will be the trap, and the trap will be sprung, and the water will close over another scream, and another liver will float in the shallows, and the loch will not remember the name. The car drove on. The loch shrank. The horse became a speck. The speck became nothing. The road went east, toward Inverness, toward civilization, toward the world of data and evidence and check boxes, and the world was waiting, and the world was normal, and the normalcy was the lie that people lived inside, and the lie was necessary, and the lie was the only thing that made the world bearable. Chapter 13. They did not talk about it. Not in the car, not at the hospital in Inverness where Daniel was treated for hypothermia and a fractured ankle, not at the police station where they filed a missing persons report for Callum, and watched the officer's face go through the familiar, professional sequence of concern, skepticism, and filing. Not in the days and weeks that followed, when they returned to Edinburgh and to their lives, and to the small, daily, unremarkable tasks that constitute existence in a world that runs on routine. They did not talk about it because there was nothing to say. The words had been used up on the shore and the road and the bridge, and what was left was not words but silence, and the silence was not empty. The silence was full. The silence was full of the loch and the horse and the dripping and the liver and the Callum shape and the fire and the cobblestones and the cold, and the fullness was the thing they carried, and the carrying was the weight, and the weight was permanent. Xavier went back to Lyon. He finished his exchange year and he returned to Edinburgh for his PhD, and he became a geologist who studied deep-water sediments and who never in any of his research visited a loch. He studied them from a distance, core samples, seismic data, the remote clinical evidence of water that was far away and could not reach him. His colleagues noticed that he was quieter than before, that he started at sudden sounds, that he kept a small, sealed bag of dark, gritty, foul-smelling earth on his desk. And when they asked about it, he said it was a sample, and the sample was from a peat bog, and the peat was from the Highlands, and he did not elaborate. Shannon finished her nursing degree. She was good at it, excellent in fact, and the excellence was not surprising because Shannon had always been good at caring, and the caring was the thing that had almost killed her on the shore. But she did not stop caring. She cared harder. She cared more. She cared with a ferocity that was not professional but personal, as if every patient she treated was an atonement for the calf she had not saved, and the atonement was the thing that drove her, and the driving was relentless, and the relentlessness was her way of surviving. She kept a jar of peat on her windowsill. She did not tell anyone why. Daniel healed, his ankle mended. The cuts on his hands scarred over thin, white lines across his palms and fingers, and the scars were not ordinary scars. The skin around them, the skin that had been coated in peat, the skin that had touched the bridge's cobblestones, the skin that had been in contact with the creature's territory, was different. It was translucent. Not dramatically, not enough for anyone to notice unless they were looking and looking closely, but translucent, the way a scar is translucent, the way healed skin is thinner than the skin around it, and the translucence was not normal. If Daniel pressed his palm against a surface, glass, metal, stone, the contact felt different. Stickier, tighter. As if the skin were reaching for the surface, as if the skin were trying to bond, and the trying was faint, and the faintness was the distance, and the distance was 20 miles and growing, but the trying was there, and the there was permanent. Maya went back to her lab. She went back to her chemistry, to her precision, to her scalpel mind and her suture patience, and the work was the same and the world was the same, and the sameness was the thing she leaned on, because the sameness was the opposite of the loch, and the opposite was what she needed. She did not sleep well. She woke at night, at 3 in the morning, at 4, at the hour when the body is at its lowest, and the mind is at its most vulnerable, and she lay in the dark and listened, and the listening was not for sounds in the flat. The listening was for the sound of dripping, the pat-pat-pat of a mane that had no source, the steady, rhythmic, maddening sound of water that was not water but was the creature, and the creature was 200 miles away, and the distance was enough, and the distance was not enough, and the not enough was the thing that kept her awake. She kept the peat on her nightstand, a small sealed bag, dark and gritty and stinking of 10,000 years. She did not touch it. She did not need to. Its presence was enough. Its presence was the reminder that the dead repels the alive, that the peat is the shield, that the shield is the only thing between her and the water is patient, and the water is always there, and the water does not forget. Chapter 14. 6 months later, Xavier received a letter. It was not email, handwritten on thick, rough paper in a hand that was old and shaky and precise, and the postmark was Drumnadrachet. The letter was from Tam. It was short, 3 sentences. The creature has not been seen since he left. The loch is still, but the dripping has not stopped. I hear it at night on the hill in the peat, and the dripping is not the rain. Xavier folded the letter. He put it in the drawer of his desk beside the bag of peat. He sat for a long time, and the sitting was not thinking. The sitting was listening. Listening for a sound that was 200 miles away and was not 200 miles away, because the sound was not a sound but a scent, and the scent was not a scent but a tether, and the tether was not a tether but a condition, and the condition was the water, and the water was everywhere, and everywhere was the loch. He picked up the bag of peat. He opened it. He dipped his fingers in his right hand, his fingertips, and the peat was cold and gritty and dead, and the deadness was the shield, and the shield held, and the holding was the thing that let him breathe. He did not hear the dripping. He listened. He did not hear it. He told himself he did not hear it. He told himself this every night. Some nights he believed it. Chapter 15. The story ends where it began, at the water's edge. A year after the trip, a year and a day to be precise, because anniversaries are the mind's way of marking time, and time is the thing that passes, and the passing is the thing that is supposed to heal, and the healing is the lie that the living tell themselves because the alternative is the truth, and the truth is that some wounds do not heal, and some waters do not still, and some creatures do not sleep. A group of hikers arrived at the village of Drumnadrachet. They were young, they were fit, they were equipped. They had waterproofs and rucksacks and a drone and a list, checked, methodical, the list of a person who believes the world can be managed, and they went to the pub, and the pub landlord, an old man, heavy, slow-moving, with a beard the color of rust and eyes the color of the loch, served them pints and said, "Didn't he go near the water after dark?" The young people smiled. They were the smiles of people who have heard warnings before and have heeded none of them, because warnings are stories, and stories are data that has not been verified, and the verification is the thing that science requires, and science is the lens through which these young people see the world, and the lens is clear and useful and cannot see what is beneath the surface of a blackwater loch. They set up camp on the shore. They lit a fire. They drank whiskey. The rain fell. The loch was still. The mountains were reflected in its surface with mirror perfection, and the reflections were not reassuring. In the morning, they found a horse. It was standing in the reeds at the edge of the loch, not 20 meters from the camp, and it was the most beautiful animal any of them had ever seen. A charcoal gray stallion, its coat smooth and metallic, its mane long and black and dripping, 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 and the dripping was the sound of a leaking tap in a silent room. And the sound was wrong, and the wrongness was the thing they should have noticed. And the wrongness was the thing they did not notice, because the horse was beautiful, and the beauty was perfect, and the perfection was the trap. One of them reached out a hand. The loch did not remember the names of the dead, but it remembered the shape of a hand reaching out, and the reaching was the trigger, and the trigger was the beginning, and the beginning was always the same. Beauty, touch, bond, water, liver. The loch was patient. The loch was always patient. The loch was waiting. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe, so you don't miss the stories yet to come.